Welcome to episode 11 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen. And before we get started tonight, I'd like to take some time to remember Oilers forward Colby Cave, who tragically passed away on Saturday at the age of 25. I was shocked last week when I heard that Colby had been put in a medically induced coma, as I'm sure all Oilers fans were when they heard the news. But I was praying he would make a full recovery and be back playing for the Oilers again down the road, and it's just sad to hear that he didn't make it. So my deepest condolences go out to Colby's wife Emily and his family during what must be the most painful time of their lives. I'm proud to see a kid from my home province of Saskatchewan who wasn't drafted will his way to the NHL and get to live out his NHL dream that he had, like most kids growing up in Canada. And it was really touching to see all the cars that lined the side of the highway near his hometown in North Battleford to pay tribute to him. We have a mutual friend, and he told me that Colby was one of the best people he ever met. And I've read a lot of tweets from players he played with over the past few days who said the exact same thing. So he was obviously a great guy who was loved by many, and he will be missed. And I'd like to dedicate tonight's episode of the podcast to his memory. Rest in peace, Colby. Once an Oiler, always an Oiler. And now I'll bring in tonight's guest. He was the first ever guest on the 99 Forever podcast, and he's back for his second appearance on the show. Canada West broadcaster and TSN 1260 radio host Brian Swane. Brian, how's it going tonight, man?
Hey, I'm not doing too bad at all, Eric. Strange times, but I'm excited to be back. I guess if you're going to be on Oilers, an Oilers podcast, number 1 is a great one to be on, and then number 11 is a great episode too. So you got me booked down for number 99 too?
Yeah, I'm going to bring you back. It'll be a full episode dedicated to Wayne Gretzky. So
there we go.
Is Mark Messier the number 11 you were thinking of, or do you have I know you're a huge basketball fan too. Is there a number 11 from the NBA that stands out too?
No. For on an Oilers podcast, I mean, you got to go with the Moose, right? So yeah,
exactly.
One of the kind that I know. Well, he's somebody I think we're probably going to be talking about a little bit later on in this episode.
I have a feeling he will be mentioned. Do you have a favorite Mark Messier memory that stands out?
It's funny. It's not Oilers related, but it would be the guarantee that he made for the Rangers in the comeback in the 94 semifinals against the Devils when they were down 3-2, and he said they were going to come back and win the series. And of course, they did just that. He had an incredible game, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. And that to me, these days in sports, a lot of people guarantee things. It's like seems about every couple of weeks there's somebody saying, "Oh, we're gonna win this, or we're gonna do that." It was pretty rare for somebody to call their shot like that back then. So when he did it, I was, as a kid, I thought, okay, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. But lots of great memories with him as an Oiler too. I think nothing specific, but what just stands out is how, in the absence of Wayne Gretzky, and as the Oilers kind of picked up the pieces and began a new era after Gretzky was traded in '89, and of course, then they were eliminated by the Kings in the '89 playoffs. How he was kind of the one that really stepped up, became the unquestioned leader and face of that franchise, and willed them to the 1990 Stanley Cup.
Absolutely. And you made me think of something just now. Did you ever see that ESPN documentary? I think it was called June 17th, and it's about all the different events that happened that day. It was, I think, the Rangers Stanley Cup parade. It was the OJ White Bronco chase. There was a golf event too that's escaping me, but did you ever see that?
I think I remember just about all of them. It's you got you mentioned, of course, the Rangers parade, the OJ chase, which was going on in the middle of, I want to say, Game 4 of the NBA Finals, and they actually cut away from the NBA
cut away, yeah.
To show that. Yeah, there was. I'm not a huge golf guy, but I know there was a major tournament, or one of the majors. It might have been, I'm going to guess, maybe the U.S. Open. I know Ken Griffey Jr. had like some record-breaking home run or something like that day, and then it was also the first day of the World Cup that the USA hosted in 1994. And I could be missing something else too. It's quite quite a remarkable day in sporting history.
I just actually looked it up right now on Wikipedia. It was Arnold Palmer playing his last round at the U.S. Open.
Oh, okay, there you go. There you go.
So in '94,
And
he would have
was I right
been.
about the Ken Griffey Jr. thing, or am I just making that up?
Yeah, Ken Griffey Jr. ties Babe Ruth's record for the most home runs before June 30th in a season. He had 26. So that's a good one you nailed too. And yeah, Arnold Palmer, I guess, would have been 64 when he played his final round at the U.S. Open. So yeah, a lot of events that took place that day.
Unbelievable. All that can go on within the span of really, that was probably only within about 10 hours of each other.
Yeah. And speaking of ESPN 30 for 30 docs, are you looking forward to the new 10-part series on the 97-98 Chicago Bulls?
I very much am. That was not a team that I liked. I never grew up liking the Bulls because they beat my teams every year. But I mean, this is going to be fascinating to watch, and it's been interesting with some of the chatter that's been coming up before of it, of how Michael Jordan is not quite happy with how he's betrayed portrayed, I should say, because he feels that it kind of makes him look like, for lack of a better term, not a great teammate or not a nice guy, but that was his reputation.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, he was pretty much a jerk to his teammates, and I think if most of his teammates you asked him for back then said, yeah, he was a jerk, but that was what the all competitive side of him
the ultra competitor, right? Like you couldn't.
Yeah.
There was no one more. When you think about him and Wayne Gretzky, the two, I would say, in my opinion, the two greatest players in the history of their respective sports, but such different personalities. I mean, you had Gretzky, who was the ultimate gentleman, team first guy, put his teammates before anyone, and then Michael Jordan, known as, maybe you can speak to this even more, but the biggest trash talker in NBA history, as well as the greatest player, and like you said, didn't have the best reputation as a teammate.
No, and I'm so glad you brought up that as well, then sort of juxtaposing that with Gretzky, because I think, we've there's been a lot, of course, lately, a lot of tributes and talk about Kobe Bryant, of course, with his unfortunate passing earlier this year, and how he was kind of he was a guy that really opened up in his post-playing career, but his reputation as a player as well was kind of the same thing, that he didn't get along with a lot of teammates because he was so driven and competitive. And you do see that a lot in pro sports. Guys that have the most successful guys are the guys that have that reputation. It's like you can't be a nice guy and a winner at the same time. I'm so glad that you brought up Wayne Gretzky, because it shows that you can be both a nice guy, a good teammate, and still be at the very pinnacle of your game and a champion. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And I think that's so important, because I've never felt that way. I've never felt that you had to be, and just an absolute, if you're going to be I've never believed you can't be a success. To be a success, you can't have any friends kind of attitude.
Oh, and I completely agree. I mean, Gretzky's my hero, so it's a guy that I've idolized my whole life, and easy person to sort of emulate and try and be like. But when you think of Jordan, he was just, maybe the competitive side almost took over a little bit and didn't allow him to open up and maybe even enjoy the success with his teammates as much as he could. I could be speaking out of turn here. I'm not sure. I'm looking forward to watching that documentary and finding everything out. But did you hear that part during the Kobe memorial when MJ said that Kobe would phone him at like 3 a.m. to ask him basketball related questions?
Yeah. That tells you, I mean, those two were so similar in that way. Like I say, I mean, the biggest difference, I think, is Kobe really opened up in his post-playing career and really showed different sides of his personality. I think mellowed out quite a bit and began to appreciate life outside of the game, with his family, with other pursuits, with other interests. Michael Jordan, 20 years on, or 15 years on since he's retired, is still very much the same guy, to the point that when he actually he was shedding some tears there at Kobe's ceremony, and people were saying that's the most human they've ever seen Michael Jordan, and he's a guy who's, gosh, he's got to be in his mid-50s now, and he's been in the public eye for 30 plus years.
I think he's born in
And
63. I can't be 100% sure. So that would
yeah,
be
I think you're right, because he was 30 when he won his third title in 93. So
55, 56?
yeah, 50, 56, 50.
Oh,
Boy,
50,
almost
actually
20 hours.
57. Yeah,
Time is
57.
getting away on us, my friend.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I can't even remember what we started here with, but that's really shows you how super ultra competitive Michael Jordan was. And of course, one of the infamous things about him too was his Hall of Fame speech just a few years ago, which was again, many years removed from his playing career. He used that to throw shade at people that he felt disrespected him. This is a guy who's achieved everything you possibly can in the sport. He's had a long time to sort of step away from the game, look back, maybe gain some perspective, and here he is going to the Hall of Fame, and what the pinnacle for any athlete, regardless of your sport. And in that moment, he chooses to throw shade at people, and that speaks to his personality, I guess. And looping back to your original point there, Eric, you mentioned that you can't enjoy when you're that driven. How can you enjoy it in the moment? How can you enjoy those victories with your teammates? How can you reflect and take such pride and satisfaction in your accomplishments? And if that's the case, then you got to ask yourself, is it really worth it?
Right. And he obviously dealt with some issues off the court as well personally, and you feel for him for those. But at the same time, maybe could have acted a little different. I don't want to judge MJ too much. But I am interested to see that documentary and how everything plays out. Other than that, though, how's the past month been for you with no live sports on TV?
It's been pretty. I don't know what the word is for it. I'm not sure. I'm sure you're probably the same way. How would we even describe what we've been experiencing over these last few weeks? I was just thinking today is as we're recording this, it's 5 weeks already since the NHL put the pause on their season. Last night was 5 weeks ago already, the Oilers' last game.
Yeah, it's going quick. And you know what? Everyone on Twitter keeps saying it seems like it's been longer. It seems like it's been months and months. But really, it's because this is the first time in our lives that there's never been any sports on TV. I mean, even in the summer when baseball and when hockey and football and basketball are over, baseball still kind of carries through. And some years you get like the Summer Olympics, like you would have got this year, to get you through to September, October, when all the other sports start happening. But this year it's just nothing. We're watching all these old games. They're even showing sports movies on TSN and Sportsnet right now. Do you like seeing the old games, or is it kind of growing old on you?
It's there. You know what? I do enjoy them quite a bit. At the same time, it's kind of almost depressing to keep seeing it, because it reminds you so much of what you're missing, but it makes you appreciate that too. And I think if the last month or the last few weeks have shown me anything, it's that it shows both how irrelevant and yet incredibly relevant sports is in our life, because with everything else that we're all dealing with right now, concern for everyone's our health and safety, and the loved ones, those we care about around us, and making sure that we, as humans, regardless of where we are in the world, come together to get through this. The sports is really puts in perspective that sports is just, it is what it is. They're just games in the end, but at the same time, it shows you how when it's been taken out of our lives, and we don't have that to look forward to each day, and we don't have that to bring us together as fans, as a community, and we don't have these things that we love to talk about with everyone around the water cooler each morning, about the previous night's game. It at the same time shows how important role sports plays in our life, and it's a pivotal thing. It's like I say, for bringing communities together, for just giving you something to get you through that 9 to 5, that job today, because you're looking forward to watching, sitting down with your kids and watching the game that night. So it's been interesting. It's like I say, it's at once the least important thing in the world, and the other side, the most important thing in the world, because you know what? I mean, a lot of people right now they're struggling with mental health as they go through this, and I think sports is just like I say, giving you something to bring you together, gives you something to look forward to, is a big part of maintaining your mental health, and we just don't have that right now.
I couldn't have said it any better. And what are your thoughts overall? Like, when you really think about it, are you still hopeful that we will get the NBA and NHL playoffs back this summer, or is it starting to seem more and more likely to you that it'll be canceled altogether?
I'm to be honest, and I hate to say this because I know people are holding out hope, but I'm just not too optimistic, and I haven't been too much from day one, because if you look at where we are in the society right now, and you think of where we have to get to be at a point where they could actually get to playing again, it seems like there's a lot that has to happen between now and then. Maybe they can come with some situation where they centralize teams, everyone's in the same area. I know, what, I'll put it this way: if there's a solution to be found where this could happen, I know these leagues are going to figure it out, and they're going to do whatever they can to make it happen. But it just, with each passing day, it just seems less realistic. And but you know what? As I just said in my previous comments, sports are so important because they give people something to look towards, to get excited for. And if holding on to that hope that you're going to get to watch your team play again in 7 or 8 weeks helps get you through another day, then I think that's great. And just keep hanging on to that. And you never know. You never know. I mean, You know what? Regardless of whenever it starts again, we're one day closer to it each day.
Definitely. And I'm a huge optimist in general, especially when it comes to my teams. And in this scenario, I think there is still some hope that we will see the Oilers in the playoffs this summer. And the reason I say that is because if the NHL was confident that there was going to be no season, they would have just kept the draft and NHL awards as scheduled, I think, in June, and said, we're not going to be able to get back, but we can still do a draft similar to the one in 2005 in Ottawa, where they did it in a hotel. There wasn't a big production on the draft stage and everything. And I think because they have still postponed these events to the fall, it gives some hope that they're planning to be playing hockey in July and August. So I'm just trying to look at all the aspects that we see. And they are mentioning the idea of doing neutral site games with no fans. I think it's safe to say, even if the NHL does return this summer, there won't be fans in the seats. But if they could pick like 4 cities across North America and send each division to one of those cities. So I know Grand Forks, North Dakota has been mentioned. If they sent like the Oilers, Flames, Canucks, and Golden Knights there, you put them all in a hotel, they drive from the hotel on a bus to the arena, play the game, and immediately back to the hotel where they would quarantine themselves, I think it could work. So this is just me thinking out loud here, but these are still some options, and I'm sure the NHL has played around with a lot more. I know Bob Nicholson did a conference call the other day on the Oilers YouTube channel, and he talked about also wanting to get the NHL season resumed. So I'm holding out hope, Brian.
Well, I'll ask you this, as a fan, but also someone who has such a tremendous appreciation for the history of the game. What are you most comfortable with, say, as a bare minimum playoffs in terms of the number of teams involved, the number of series, and the number of games in each respective series?
Well, the only thing I could see them doing, if they really wanted to maybe cut the playoffs down by a week or week and a half, is to do a best of 5 in the first round. Back in the 80s, when the Oilers were winning Stanley Cups, the first round of the playoffs was a best of 5 anyway, and then it would go best of 7 for the final 3 series.
Right. The Oilers never played. I I don't think they often have to work more than 3 games to get out of the first round.
Yeah, I think 1987-88 when they won their fourth cup. I think that was the first year that all 4 series were best of 7s. I can check that on the fly here in a second, but that was I believe the first year they did it. So they could do something like that. But I read an article the other day. I think it was on the Score that the NHL is playing around with the idea of being fair to bubble teams. So the only way you can do this, because there's an uneven amount of games, if you can't resume the regular season, you either have to base it on points percentage. And I wrote an article about this not too long ago that we would see teams kind of flip-flop. So right now, I think the Flames are in 3rd in the Pacific and the Canucks are in 4th, and they would switch spots. So the Oilers would actually be facing the Canucks in the first round. And if they don't use the points percentage model, then they would have to find some sort of play-in games for the teams who are just outside. Like you could do take the top 3 teams in every division and they're safe, and then you take 2 teams who are in the current wild card spots and the 2 teams who are just outside the wild card spots, and those 4 teams sort of have like a play-in game as they do in baseball. I don't know. What do you think? Something like that?
I do love the idea of centralizing by division. I think that's very cool. And then what you could do, I guess, is once you have 3 series each, 2 semifinals and 1 division championship, and then you take those 4 teams and you group them into basically like a hockey version of the Final Four. Have you heard there has been the idea floated around of doing a rollback to where everyone's played the same amount of games? I'm not sure how you feel about that. I haven't been a big fan of that, because if you roll back, let's say you roll back to 68 games, I think is what they discussed as the one that everyone's at the bare minimum right now.
But most teams have played 69 or 70, 71 games. There might be a couple that are at 68.
What if Team A, and I'm just throwing numbers out here, I could be way off, but what if Team A has their 68 games has had 37 home games and 31 road games, and Team B is vice versa? That's a pretty significant difference in the advantage they've had in playing more home games over the course of the schedule.
How about the Oilers? The Oilers were supposed to get a season-long 6-game homestand at the end of March,
right?
Which they have played far more road games this year, and all season, Brian, I was looking forward to this. I was like, okay, the Oilers have put themselves in a good spot. They're in a playoff spot basically the entire season, except for one blip in December when they fell just outside of the wild card. Other than that, they've been in the mix all year. Right now, they're in 2nd in the division, and I'm looking forward to that 6-game homestand at the end of March where they're really going to solidify that spot, and they don't even get it. Now, that is a huge ripoff. Plus, I mean, don't get me started on the schedule, but they also had their bye week attached to the All-Star break, which gave them an 11-day break when they had so much momentum building at that time. I think they were on a 6-1-1 run when that stopped, or when they stopped playing. So, yeah, kind of frustrating that not only did we miss out on watching playoffs this month, obviously due to a bigger issue, but at the same time that they didn't get that homestand. So I'm hoping the schedule makers are going to make that up to the Oilers next year.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I mean, it's there's so many angles you can come at that from too. And I mean, I'm sure the team itself, I mean, they're looking at it from the perspective of all the lost revenue in that, and yeah, this is a little bit of a sidebar there. But as far as that schedule, the bye week schedule goes, I thought that was pretty ridiculous. And I would say that for any team, it doesn't do you any good to. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the Oilers or the Devils or anybody. It's not fair to have a team get their bye week off what is already effectively a bye week. But that's a bridge they can cross. You know what? When we're in a place when we can start actually complaining about that again, that'll mean we're in a good place.
Definitely. So there's a couple other things I wanted to catch up with you on since the last time you were on the podcast. I know you talked about hosting the Legends of the West podcast for Canada West, and I listened to a few episodes over the winter and thought you did a great job. So I'd just like to hear about your experience hosting the podcast.
It was pretty amazing experience to talk to you. Of course, Canada West this past season we had our first inaugural Hall of Fame class. There hadn't been a Hall of Fame in existence before in Canada West. So decided to look back on the first century of university sport in Western Canada, and there was 100 inductees. So I mean, I literally was talking to some people who were, some former athletes or coaches or even administrators who were in their, late 70s to ones that had just finished playing a few years ago. And I think the biggest takeaway I have from it is just quite remarkable how much sport has evolved, how much the different games have evolved, how much of a part they play in your life has evolved, how much the sports science, the training, the nutrition. Because you talk to someone who was an athlete in, say, the 1950s, and they're like running on dirt tracks, and you talk to somebody now, and the training and nutrition and everything that's at their disposal is just remarkable. And yeah, you get that, of course, that contrast in any sport as you look at it. But it was really cool to hear stories about how what people would do just back half a century ago to train, and how things that have such significant roles in our lives now, like you're concerned about nutrition and stuff like that, are not even things that they even considered.
Well, that's awesome. Are there a couple episodes from over the winter that really stood out to you?
Probably, boy, that's a great one too. Israel Adonijah probably might have been one of my favorites. University of Manitoba football player who went on to the NFL and had really a tremendous NFL career, probably the greatest NFL career that anyone has had coming out of a Canadian university. And but just an incredible guy away from the game, and he's been involved in so many things, fundraising, charitable efforts, initiatives. He's gone and worked with youth groups in Africa. He's an actor. He makes comic books, writes comic books. He now has I want to say, I could be getting this wrong, but I think it's a public relations firm, and the guy's still only in his mid-30s. He actually was even during the Obama administration given the presidential. I'm gonna get this wrong here, but I think it was the Presidential Medal of Freedom, just in recognition of all the work he did when he was playing for the Bears in Chicago. He did so much work for underprivileged youth and inner city families that he earned that recognition. Quite remarkable to think that a kid out of Winnipeg achieved all these kind of things and is now in his post-playing career. Like I say, you look at all the things he's doing is just remarkable and just a real inspiration and a genuinely nice guy, and a pretty big name in his own right. So it was quite an honor to get to speak to him.
That's really cool. And it sounds like he's a pretty well-rounded person too, to have a great interest in sports, but to also do things outside of sports. And we were talking about Kobe Bryant earlier, and I mean, he won an Oscar in his post-NBA career. So I always find it just really cool to see anyone who is maybe known for one thing and goes and it can be great, or even if they're not great, just have something that they're really passionate about outside of what they're best known for.
I have such great admiration for people like that, and that's why I never get too upset about someone who, for an athlete, as we were talking before about the Gretzky relative to the Jordan attitudes. You know what? If Wayne is able to come home and check himself out of that zone that he gets into for the game and just enjoy time with his family and have other pursuits, I think that's tremendous, and I admire people who can do that. I think that's really important for people as human beings to do that. And Kobe Bryant having won an Oscar is I don't know if I'll still ever believe that. You go back when he first came in the NBA is basically pretty much we'll call him what it is, a punk 18-year-old kid. That's kind of how he conducted himself. And he would have admitted that.
But a basketball robot too, though, right?
Well,
like
exactly.
Maybe a different persona than Connor McDavid, but at the same time, just as obsessed with basketball as Connor is with hockey.
Connor fascinates me because you're right. He does have that incredible, relentless drive and dedication to perfection, and yet at the same time, it doesn't really. His personality doesn't seem imprisoned in that. Like he does seem to be. He doesn't come across the same way as guys like Michael Jordan do, for example. I mean, Connor still does really seem like a guy who's really down to earth and really has a good grasp and perspective on things.
And we talked about Wayne earlier. Even though Wayne played a good chunk of his career in Los Angeles and New York, the two biggest cities in the United States and all of North America, and then he obviously spent the first half of his career in a small market like Edmonton, but he never lost that small town sort of value, those small town values, and that small town sort of aw shucks kind of attitude. And Connor isn't exactly the same way. I don't think Connor's as maybe engaged in interviews like as Wayne was, but there are still similarities between the two and how they conduct themselves. Once again, ultimate team guys, and reluctant to talk about their own success in a sense, but obviously two fantastic hockey players.
And I wonder too if that's just more reflective of the times. I mean, Connor McDavid would in growing up, he's been the center of attention from when he was 11, 12, 13 years old, and these guys
younger
now
even.
Junior, they're raised under the microscope. They're doing media, they're doing interviews from that young age. You just become a little bit more. It just becomes such a routine, and they become so polished at it. Is that I think they become more. I'll say it. They become more robotic, I think, in interviews. Whereas, I think for Wayne, in a lot of ways, and I could be wrong about this. I wasn't even alive when he came into the WHA, but I think he was still probably kind of a wide-eyed kid out of Ontario, who's a small town Ontario, who's suddenly thrown into like Indianapolis, which has got to be night and day from where he grew up. And then the next thing you know, he's coming to Edmonton, which is another kettle of fish altogether.
And you know what? I try to learn and soak up everything I can when it comes to Wayne Gretzky. It's fairly well documented that I'm a big Gretzky historian, but I still love it when I learn new things about him. And did you see any of that interview he did with Connor McDavid for GQ?
Yeah, that was one of the most interesting things I've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, I was really, really interested to watch it. I've watched it twice now, and one thing that I picked up from that is that Wayne, after he was traded to the Oilers, he was still in high school because that would have been his draft year in the OHL. But since he had skipped to the WHA because he was eager to turn pro at 17, then after 8 games came to Edmonton, he still had to go to high school. He made that promise with his parents that he would stay in high school until he was 18, and then he said in that the day he turned 18 he quit high school. So and there's that iconic sort of video of him on the ice with the birthday cake.
I was
blowing out the candles.
Came to me now as we were talking about this. I got that picture. I so vividly I have seen that, and I can vividly recall it now, and that pretty much puts it all in perspective, doesn't it? That there he is. He's already got the entire city at his feet, worshiping the ground he walks on, and here he is, just this 18-year-old kid getting the birthday cake in the middle of the ice in a 15, 16, 17,000 seat arena. Like that's just my head explodes just thinking about it.
I would love to find out what high school he went to, and if there was someone who could remember him, because he was only there a few months, but just to talk to someone who was in class with Wayne for a few years, because this is the star player for the WHA Edmonton Oilers, and he's sitting next to you in grade 12 science class in biology. I mean, that would just be a funny story, I think, to just kind of talk to someone and hear about those times. But it's those little things you hear in interviews that are just awesome to pick up on.
And I think we'll probably get more of that from Connor's time goes along, and I look forward to learning more about this guy and what makes him tick, and what drove him to become the the incredible athlete that he is today.
For sure. So I think this is a good time to move into some of the fun stuff we have planned for tonight. I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. Brian and I have put together a couple lists that we're going to be surprising each other with tonight. Sportsnet.ca has been running a series of all-time Game 7 dream teams for the Canadian NHL clubs, and Mark Spector wrote the piece on the Oilers. I know Low Tide from TSN 1260 also tweeted out his own list. And tonight, Brian and I are going to reveal our own Oilers dream teams to each other as well and sort of discuss the roster choices. And then after that, we're going to rank each of our 5 favorite sports jerseys from the 1990s. This is something we had talked about doing on our first podcast back in September. And as a big jersey collector, this is a topic I'm very passionate about. But let's start off with the dream team. So, Brian, are you ready to get going here?
I am. I've been ready we've been waiting for this to unveil this for a long time. So, yep, let's do it.
Okay. So I'll let you kick things off as the guest. Why don't we work our way backwards? So, your near misses or honorable mentions? Do you have a group of guys who you just didn't quite make it in?
I have a few guys, and you know what? There's probably guys that I could list as near misses for the honorable mentions. They're probably just guys who deserve to be honorable mentions of the honorable mentions. But I got 5 guys here who I just think deserve a shout out, even though I didn't make the final cut I had here, and that's Taylor Hall, Ales Hemsky, Sean Horkoff, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Curtis Joseph, who might be my all-time favorite Oilers goalie. He just wasn't around long enough for me to justify putting him on. Of course, I mean, the Oilers have a pretty storied history on goalie. That's a tough spot to win. But I had to get Cujo in there, even though he was only around for 2.5 years.
Exactly. And one of the things from this exercise that we're doing is when you're picking a player, it had to be how they were at some point with the Oilers. So, for instance, Adam Oates played with the Oilers. He had the second most assists in the 1990s behind only Wayne Gretzky. But because he played with them when he was 41 years old, you wouldn't have him on your list. If you were allowed to take him in his prime, then obviously you would want a guy like that on your roster. So that's just wanted to qualify that for any listeners too. And you mentioned Joseph. He wasn't there a long time, but in his time, he was quite impactful.
Yeah, I mean, he has, I think, one of the most iconic moments to the last 25 years for the Oilers with his famous Game 7 save.
Definitely. And my black aces were very similar to yours. I had Taylor Hall, Jordan Eberle, Ales Hemsky, Janne Niinema, Oscar Klefbom, and Curtis Joseph. So I took 3 forwards, 2D, and an extra goalie, basically one line for each position. And I mean, if you think about it, Hall and Eberle spent 6 and 7 years respectively in Edmonton. They were the beginning of, I guess you could call, rebuild 2.0 with the Tambellini era, and really they gave us something to watch for the first half of the decade until Connor arrived. There wasn't a lot to cheer about in oil country, and having 2 young guns like them were a reason to keep watching, and I'd love to have them on my list. But as I'm sure you found, putting together these lists, there was a lot of moving guys around to try and make everything fit and saying, oh, I got to switch those. But yeah, it's a shame I couldn't have a 5th line and sneak those guys in there. And also Janne Niinema and Oscar Klefbom. Niinema, when I was a kid, was one of their top power play defensemen, and Klefbom right now is their best defenseman, so just couldn't quite get them in. And I'll echo your thoughts on Joseph as well. I thought he was an outstanding goalie, but just barely missed compared to the other 2 guys that I had ahead of him.
And I'm sure we've got the same 2 guys on that. It's just I don't think there's any way either one of us could look ourselves in the mirror and justify taking them out over in favor of Cujo.
Exactly.
I absolutely love Cujo, and just an incredible goalie, an incredible person too. He had his Cujo Cloud 9 program when he was here for kids, and just a great guy.
Also, I have to mention Ales Hemsky quickly before I go into your goaltenders, because after Ryan Smith left, he was the Oilers' best player for probably 5 seasons. It's a shame he had so many injuries because I don't think we ever got to see Hemsky reach his true potential. I think if they could have had a dynamic goal scorer on his wing and he was able to avoid some of the shoulder problems he had, he would have hit 90 points at least once in his NHL career. And it's a shame because he was such a fantastic player to watch. And the nights that he wanted to be the best player on the ice, he very well could be. And I just remember watching him live, how smooth he was with the puck and what a fluid skating stride he had. Just a fantastic player for the Oilers that they got in I think 13th overall in 2001. So a good draft pick there. Okay, so I'll get your. Oh, sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say I certainly echo that, and you know what, I didn't. When I was looking over his numbers, actually, I didn't even. It gave me a greater appreciation. Like, he ranks pretty high on a lot of the Oilers lists, and you maybe don't necessarily think that just off the top of your head when you're thinking about Alex Hemsky. But you know, yeah, everything you said is so true, and I'm glad we both got the opportunity to acknowledge him.
Yeah, it's tough. Just barely missed having him in there. But we'll now move on to your two goaltenders. Who's your starter and backup, Brian?
Well, this is going to shock you. I've got Grant Fuhr starting and Bill Ranford backing up, and I don't think I need to say any more.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the closest thing we have here to a slam dunk, right?
I have to tell you, I also have the same two. I have Fuhr starting and Ranford backing up. When you think about it, Grant Fuhr is the leader in almost every category for Oilers goaltenders. He was a huge part of that team, arguably the best goaltender in the league at his peak with Edmonton, and 5-time Stanley Cup champion. I've met him, and he is the nicest pro athlete I've ever met in my entire life. Such a gentleman. And as for Ranford, what can you say about him? Won 2 Stanley Cups, one as the starter in 1990 when he backstopped the Oilers to an unexpected cup. I think that's and obviously took home the Conn Smythe Trophy, so well deserved. It's pretty hard to go with anyone but those two.
Yeah, I don't think we really need to say much to justify those picks. If not, just if you're not familiar with either one of those guys, you're probably not an Oilers fan, so you're probably not listening to this. And if you aren't, Wikipedia and just read about these guys, and I think that'll tell you all you need to know, because they both had remarkable careers. Fear especially. I mean, Fear's career with what he achieved with one team, that being the Oilers. Of course, he went on to play with several others before all was said and done. But what he achieved just with the Oilers, just unbelievable.
Oh, exactly. And the fact that he went on to have a career resurgence in St. Louis later in his career, and that was well into his 30s, just speaks to how good he was. And that's one of the things that does kind of bother me when some people talk about the 1980s and how the goaltending was terrible, and that's why there were such high point totals. I think we never talk enough about how the game just opened up and how they adopted a more European style. It's always the negative that the goaltenders were terrible, but at the same time, they were playing with pads that are twice as heavy and half the size as what goaltenders use now, and all the forwards were using heavy wooden sticks and not eating properly. Didn't have the right nutrition, didn't have the right modern training. So there's so many things that go into it. It's not just a matter of the goaltending was bad.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I really, anyone who brings up that topic, I honestly don't have much time for it, because you can't. It's apples and oranges. You can't compare them at all. I wish we could take players from one era and put them, and trade places and have today's top goalies playing with the equipment that they had back then, with the way the game was officiated, with the lack of other, as you mentioned, the nutrition, the training, all that, and then vice versa. I'd love to see what Grant Fuhr, and name any guys from that era, Billy Smith. As an Oiler, of course, you'd think Andy Moog. Throw them into today and give them all these advantages that the athletes have now, and see how they do. And the game is so different, but like you say too, it works both ways. I mean, the forwards now, the equipment they have at their disposal, so much more advanced. So yeah, he was widely regarded year in and year out as being, if not the best, one of the best 2 or 3 in the games pretty much every year throughout the 80s. And I think that's all you need to know.
Absolutely. And just to my point, the fact that he was able to, in the 90s, in a tougher era, to show that he was still a good goaltender later on, I think that even more solidified his spot in the Hall of Fame. Who were your third pairing D?
Okay, so I'll I guess I give a qualifier here. I ultimately decided that I was going to in I was having such a hard time picking the lines and deep pairings that I decided I was going to keep guys that played together. That familiarity with one another was going to be important. So I was almost selecting in groups, whether it was the forwards or the defense. So my third defensive pairing, even though they only played together for 1 year, they were absolute dynamite. They nearly carried the Oilers to a Stanley Cup. Would be Chris Pronger and Jason Smith.
Well, it's hard to pick against those two. Pronger, an all-time great. Jason Smith, just a steady defenseman, blocked shots, played tough in his own end, was always the first into the fray if there was ever a scrum. Hard to not have a guy like that. And even Pronger in his 1 year made such an impact. He's a huge addition to the Oilers' blue line. Could put up big numbers and would play as physical as they come out there, maybe dirty on a lot of times too, and just a physically imposing man to have on the blue line, isn't he?
He was, and you know what he did. He was so instrumental, and I mean, I know he's not a popular player among Oilers fans, and probably rightfully so. But just looking at what that team was able to do and how pivotal a role he had in it, I thought, looking at the all-time defensive pairings, I thought Pronger and Smith were one of the Oilers' all-time best, and I thought Smith really drove it home for me too, because he was not, you know, he didn't have the a lot of the gifts that Chris Pronger had, but he was his leadership role on this team, and he was captain for a number of years in sort of a transitionary time for this team, and I think that can't be overlooked either, and just a very steady, reliable guy. So together they were a dynamic combination.
Absolutely. And this probably won't shock you considering how often we think alike, but I had a lot of guys who played together too. I considered chemistry very big for me when I was putting together these lines. So I wanted to make sure that I had guys who had played together. On this first pairing, I'll tell you, my third pairing, I didn't go that way, but it does trend that way throughout my lineup. So I had Kevin Lowe and Boris Mironov.
Oh, you gotta love that. Boris Mironov. What a, you know, I think we were mentioning this to you recently. It's just like he's got to be like a cult favorite among pretty much every Oilers fan.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, in the late '90s, he was a guy who could contribute from the back end. He had a couple 40-point seasons, including a 46-point season 1 year, which is excellent production for a defenseman. And he had a huge frame, good shot. Just a guy that I had to have in there. And he's my only right shot D-man in my entire top six. So I wanted to have at least one righty in there. And of course, Kevin Lowe, Mr. Oiler. Despite what some people might say about his managerial or career in hockey operations for the Oilers, this is a guy who was the first ever draft pick in Oilers history, scored the first ever goal in Oilers history, won all 5 Stanley Cups with the Oilers. It holds the records for most regular season and playoff games with the team, was a captain of the Oilers, head coach, general manager. What more can you say?
Yeah, agreed. And I won't say too much because I may have some names coming up here later.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, you hit the nail on the head. And just a quick thing I like to throw to you here is there's been so much talk about Kevin Lowe. Does he deserve to have his number retired? And can it happen in this current environment, given his current role with the team and the fact that what has transpired in his current role with the team or in the front office and whatnot has really kind of left a sour taste in a lot of fans' mouths. Number one, does he deserve to have his
Yes.
number retired? And number two, can it happen, or does there need to be a lot more water in the
No,
bridge?
I don't think they need to wait any longer. At the same, like the Oilers apparently have this rule that they only retire jerseys of Hockey Hall of Fame players. I think Kevin Lowe is probably on the fringe of a Hockey Hall of Fame induction already anyway. But guys like Ryan Smith and Kevin Lowe both deserve to have their jerseys retired. I don't want to have a Ring of Honor. I think that cheapens it or lessens it. If you were a great player for the Oilers, you should have your number retired by the team. It doesn't matter if you weren't considered an elite player, because that's the thing with Ryan Smith. Scored almost 400 goals in the NHL, nearly 300 with the Oilers, but was never regarded as a top level player during his prime. And I think that's what ultimately won't get him in the Hockey Hall of Fame, even though I think he deserves to be there based on his international resume alone. But for a guy like Kevin Lowe, you look at everything he accomplished, especially what he's meant to this franchise. You're being retired for your playing career, not for your managerial career. And as much as fans want to also get mad at him for that, let's not forget he was still the GM when the Oilers went to the final in 2006. So I wouldn't be quick to say that he doesn't deserve to have that. I'm a big proponent that he should be able to get his number 4 retired. And the fact that 2 guys have now worn it in the past decade, after it was sort of already unofficially retired for about 15 years before that, he should have his place up next to the other greats at Rogers Place.
The one thing I say with Kevin Lowe is just let's say that he had after he retired in '98, he never coached, never managed, never did anything else with the Oilers. That was it. He retired. You hadn't heard from him for 20 years. And then today, someone came to you and said, "Do you want to retire Kevin Lowe's number?" I'm sure it would be like a snap of the finger. Everyone would say yes in a heartbeat. It's unfortunate that what has happened over the last, since then has kind of, I think, really colored people's judgments and memories of what he did as a player, and they don't appreciate. You rattle off the resume there. He's done everything historical. He's the all-time leader in games played, scored the first goal.
Yeah.
One of the few with the 5 Stanley Cups, served as a captain, and was a pretty darn good player. As a defenseman, on top of that all.
He was an all-star at one point. I think he played in one. Yeah. Think of it like this: since 1979, when he arrived in Edmonton, he's been associated with the Oilers organization for all but 4 seasons that he spent with the Rangers. So he's basically given 37 out of 41 years to the Oilers. That's more than anyone. So yes, he deserves.
Incredible. I hadn't really even thought of it from that story, but I had that just wow.
It's remarkable, right?
That puts it all in perspective. I hadn't even thought of it that way before.
So he, this is a guy who gave his life to Edmonton, and I believe he deserves to have his number retired. Anyway, we'll move on to your second pair now.
Yes. So my second pair is the aforementioned Kevin Lowe with a guy who also has a bit of a checkered history with the Oilers, but ultimately is Steve Smith.
Okay.
They were a dynamite pairing towards after Paul Coffey was traded for the last couple of Oilers Stanley Cups. Steve Smith, I think, underappreciated. He's of course remembered for what went down in Game 7 against Calgary in 1986, but he grew up. That happened to him, I think, when he was, I remember it happened on his birthday, but I can't remember. I think he was only maybe 20, 21. So for him to get over that and become as good as a player he was, and he was an all-star as well himself. A very good power play weapon. So I'm going Lowe and Smith.
I like it. And I don't have to go too deep on my second pairing. It's your third pairing. I have Chris Pronger and Jason Smith.
Okay.
As we talked about, Chris Pronger, just an awesome one-on-one defender with a great reach and could deliver punishing body checks. He also was deadly on the power play, had good hockey sense. So this is a guy, if you can have him on your second pairing, you must have some really really talented guys on your first pair, and with Jason Smith, like we said, just such a leader, such a battler. Hard to not have a guy like that in there, and maybe not the most talented player, but I went with a lot more. I don't want to give away too much, but I went with a lot more skill up front. So I wanted to make sure that I had some more of that toughness on the back end. And I think that Pronger and Smith would be two guys who won't let things get out of hand if someone starts to start mucking things up a little bit with some of their skilled forwards.
No, and to that, I would say, too, every other name that we've mentioned here, of course, we both had Kevin Lowe, and then you had Mironov, and I had Smith. Those were all guys who could just as easily mix it up as well. So I think we're building a pretty strong lineup here.
Absolutely. And who is your top pair?
Well, I'm guessing you went the same way, too. Now, this is a pairing that was regarded as, I think, one of the best of the 80s. I think some people would even maybe say this is a top 10 or top 15 all-time pairing. And again, checks all the boxes, both offensively, defensively, pure skill, toughness. Paul Coffey and Charlie Huddy.
Yeah, and you know what? We can just speak on it together because I have the exact same top pairing. I mean, how can you not have those two as the Oilers' top pairing?
You can't. Hey, it's again. I mean, I know Charlie Huddy doesn't jump out as a sexy name, but I mean, these two together, they were one of the dominant. They were dominant, and I think they still are one of the greatest defensive pairings of all time.
Exactly. And you know what? Although Charlie Huddy doesn't get acknowledged for his offensive contributions, mainly because he played next to Paul Coffey, who is the all-time leading scorer in combined regular season and playoff points by a defenseman, Huddy still had multiple 50-point seasons with the Oilers and scored 20 goals one year. So this is a guy who was still able to contribute from the back end, and he was there for all 5 Oilers Stanley Cup teams, one of the few guys we mentioned who was there. And then you got Paul Coffey. I mean, what can you say? This is a guy who hit 130 points in a season, was second in the league in points behind only Gretzky one year, I think with 135 points in, I want to say 85 off the top of my head. But just next to Bobby Orr, I believe he's the second greatest pure offensive defenseman in NHL history, and the Oilers were blessed to have him for 7 years. It's a shame it couldn't have gone longer, but just a great player, and was a huge part of those Stanley Cup teams.
Yeah, these guys are, again, it's very much similar to Fuhr and Ranford. I don't think we really need to justify these picks. They speak for themselves, and I obviously didn't really get to see Bobby Orr play. I've only seen the highlights, so I'm going to say that Paul. I think we both could easily say that Paul Coffey's been the greatest defenseman in our lifetime.
And absolutely, and he could take the puck end to end. Probably was considered one of the greatest skaters, if not the greatest skater in NHL history until McDavid came around. So the fact that the Oilers were able to have a guy like that just speaks to how dominant that team was in the 80s. And it's a shame. I say a shame kind of jokingly because he broke Bobby Orr's record in 86, but it's a shame he didn't get to 50 goals, just too short. It would have been so cool to see a defenseman hit 50.
Yeah, because I don't know if you'll ever see that happen again. I really don't.
I don't think so. I think that record is safe. It would take a phenomenal year. Like, you look at a guy like John Carlson, the season he was having in Washington this year, and he wasn't even close to it. So it's it will be tough for anyone to eventually reach. So with our defense, we both have Chris Pronger and Paul Coffey on different pairings. So that's going to present some challenges for whatever team our Oilers lineups would be facing in a Game 7 Stanley Cup final. Okay, what is your fourth line, Brian? All
right. So again, I decided to weigh chemistry very heavily here. So guys that I took apart, like a reason maybe somebody like Hemsky didn't get in is just because I couldn't find like a great line to put him on that I knew he had chemistry with. So I just want to again qualify with that. But this is probably the greatest fourth line in the history of hockey. McDavid, Eberle, and Draisaitl.
Wow.
Yeah,
I don't think you could I don't think you could find a better one anywhere. That's better than most teams' first lines.
yeah. I decided to go with that. These guys all at some point in time or another played together. Now, obviously, the Oilers moving forward, hopefully, ideally, in an ideal world, they have McDavid and Draisaitl on opposite lines. But there were so many great centers in Oilers history and I couldn't. I had to get both of these guys on. So obviously moving Draisaitl to the wing on this, but and then having Everley flanking McDavid on the other side. But this is. This is the fourth line now, and you know what? 8 or 9 years from now, this probably be the number one line in Oilers history potentially.
Potentially, they have a tough couple guys to knock off the top of the mountain, but that would be amazing if they're even in the conversation. I went with Ryan Smith, Doug Weight, and Bill Guerin. So
Okay.
you got, I was talking to my buddy Kirby about this the other day, and I was just kind of running my lines past him before I came on the show because I wanted to have a sounding board. Now he's not an Oilers fan, but he even said that's an Olympic caliber line right there, and all three of them were Olympians. So to have a guy like Ryan Smith, your gritty goal scorer who goes hard to the net and plays hurt and just is a heart and soul guy. You got a guy like Doug Weight, a creative center who could just find passes through small seams, and Bill Guerin, just a big goal scoring power forward. I mean, how can you bet against that line? If that's your fourth line, you know that the top three lines are going to be really hard to deal with.
That is very true.
And they all played together. When I first started watching the Oilers in the late 90s and early 2000s, that was the Oilers' top line when they would go up against Dallas in the playoffs, and I can remember watching that trio together. So personally, that's one of the only lines on this list that I can say that I really watched them at their peak. So that was really cool to be able to see that in my childhood.
Well, in that case, then I'm going to steal your thunder. Just jump right ahead to my number 3 so I can weigh in on this, because that is my number 3 line.
Oh, okay.
Weight Guerin Smith. Yeah.
I love it how we sort of have opposites. Like you had Pronger and Smith as your third pairing, and I had them as my second pairing. So yeah, just go ahead, take over from there.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Eric, and you said that when you first started watching the Oilers, and really for me, I was fortunate enough to be able to remember a little bit of the late dynasty years, but I mean, this is when I can really, the late 90s is when I first had the most clear memories of, and to me, Weight Guerin Smith, they defined that sort of 97 to 2001 period of the Oilers they were outmatched, they were outgunned, they were out everything, and yet that team had so much heart, so much competitiveness. They always managed to scrap their way into the playoffs. It was never easy. It was always coming down to the last week of the season. And every time they got to the playoffs, and they even won a couple series, of course, 97, 98. And they never even won more than, they got swept in 99, won one game in 2000, then won 2 games in 2000 and won. And of course, Guerin was traded by then, but they always made life absolutely miserable for the Stars. And in those famous first round playoffs, and you hear the Stars players talk about that, even when they went as far as the conference finals or the Stanley Cup finals a couple of years, they would say that those toughest series they had were against the Oilers. And to me, those guys almost resonate more to me than the Oilers Stanley Cup championship teams and players do.
And that's fair.
Yeah,
because you were around for it. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just and it's just what they embodied. I mean, the Oilers of the 80s were so incredibly talented that they almost would like fall backwards out of bed and win 10 games.
Yeah, exactly.
These guys had to fight for everything, and nothing ever came easy. And to me, like I say, the embodiment of that is Weight Guerin Smith.
Absolutely. And I'll move on to my third line now, which is fairly similar to your fourth line. I have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid, and Leon Draisaitl. Now, find me a better third line even. We talk about fourth line. Connor McDavid, 2-time Art Ross Trophy winner by the age of 21. Leon Draisaitl is going to win the scoring title this year as well. these are guys who are both 100-point players by the time they're in their early 20s. Connor McDavid could go on to be one of the best players in the history of the game. And if we redid this list, as you mentioned earlier, in 10 years or even 5 years, he could be higher in this list. We haven't seen his prime yet, or Draisaitl's. For most of the other players on this list, well, basically anyone who's retired, we did see them. And we were fortunate that these guys majorly had their prime years in Edmonton. So it's a big reason why I think this roster is so stacked. And aside from the Draisaitl and McDavid, you got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who's also an extremely talented, smart player, and can also be the defensive conscience on that line. And Draisaitl has chemistry with Nuge. Connor's had chemistry with Nuge before too, so I really like how that line looks. And they would be deadly. Connor McDavid setting up Draisaitl. We know what those two can do, and I said that chemistry was going to be big for me, and just Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. You can see him adding in on that line too. I debated having Eberle there, but I thought, if this is a game 7, I got to have someone who can kill a penalty, someone who can go out there and we'll be smart in the defensive zone. So I took Nugent-Hopkins there.
And that's a fair point. That was a lot of debate I was having too. I really wanted to find a place for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and it really, as I was saying before with Alex Hemsky, is how until he really kind of step back and take a look at everything he's done and all his accomplishments and his longevity with the team, you don't appreciate it. And it's the same thing with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And I was saying to you, and I'll give you a plug here with you for the Hockey Writers, that I thought a really nice article on him a few weeks ago, just about the significance he's meant to the Oilers. And he's kind of always been in the shadow, right? I mean, at first it was the shadow of Taylor Hall, and now of course the shadow of Draisaitl and McDavid. But quietly, he's gone about his business. He's been very reliable. He's been here for almost a decade now, and he's evolved into a very, very good two-way player.
Absolutely. And actually his birthday was this week, so happy 27th birthday, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Still looks 17, so that's that'll be good for him when he's 40. I mean, you know what? I hope that he goes end to end with the Oilers in his career, and the day he retires as an Oiler, he might look 25 by then. So, right, it's funny, I follow I mean, we all do some female Oiler fans on Twitter too, and it's always funny to hear some of the things they'll tweet, like Nuge, give me your skincare routine or something like that. It gives me a laugh. And actually, not even just females, I would like his skincare routine too. So
wouldn't we all like to be pretty?
Exactly.
Famous, rich, pretty, talented. Yeah, he's got it all, right?
He's got it all. And also a golden retriever owner, so that's another check mark in his books as far as I'm concerned. As the
one thing I've discovered during this period right now is that all the others have lovable dogs, it seems.
Yeah, well, I follow a lot of them on Instagram. So I remember last summer when Nurse got his Rottweiler and when McDavid got his Bernie Doodle. So it was it's kind of funny. I actually even follow Connor McDavid's dog's Instagram account that his girlfriend runs. So it's kind of funny to keep up with them and see what they're doing during this quarantine. Something to keep us entertained. But
got some serious skills too.
They do, and it's funny to see Connor was doing squats while holding his dog for extra resistance the other day. That was kind of funny. Yeah. I'll move on to your second line now.
I'm really starting to suspect here that we may have identical first and second lines. This is going to be good. We'll find out. So feel free to jump in if you got the same as me here. Again, chemistry was huge in why I went with this. Messier, Anderson, Simpson.
I have the exact same second line, so we can both just kind of speak to this.
Yeah. And you know what, we were talking earlier about Paul Coffey, and it's a shame that he didn't, play longer with the Oilers. But if he didn't, we wouldn't have Craig Simpson. So quite the trade-off. Craig Simpson was, I think he was like prototypical power forward before the power forward was really a thing.
Took a lot of abuse
I
in
think
front
he
of the
was
net.
like he was like the the forerunner to Ryan Smith.
Yeah.
Both guys who just would go and stand in front of the net, do whatever it takes. Broken bones, missing teeth, black eyes, and they would just stand in there, take all the abuse to score. And I always loved Craig Simpson. His career was cut really short, unfortunately,
It's
because of the
such a
beatings he
shame.
took.
He took so many cross checks to the back
Yeah.
that he had to retire at, I believe, 28 years old. So such a shame that his career was cut short. Only played 10 years in the league. But you know what? Always a very good-looking guy. You knew that he was going to you knew he was going to have a career in television after this.
Yeah. Speaking of skincare routines.
Yeah, I'd love to see Craig Simpson do more Oiler games. Like, he still lives in Edmonton. That's the great thing. He travels to Toronto to do the Leaf games basically every Saturday during the winter. But the fact that he still calls Edmonton home all these years after playing for the Oilers, I think he last played for them in, I want to say 92, 93? 93, I think he was traded?
92, 93.
Yeah, he played 2 years with the Sabres, I think, to wrap up. But just a great player, and scored 56 goals the year he was traded from Pittsburgh to Edmonton. And the one good thing about this dream scenario is we're able to have Paul Coffey and Craig Simpson on the same team. So
exactly.
that strengthens this roster even more. Anyway, I'll let you go on with the other two before I jump in.
Well, I mean, and again, these are, one needs to be. What more can you say about Messier, Anderson, both Hall of Famers? I mean, I'm talking, of course, about Messier right off the top of the show here. But Messier, 5 Stanley Cups with one team, unbelievable. Was captain, just a heart and soul guy, but who was often, when you use that heart and soul term to qualify players or to define a player, it means that they're indisposable, and they're a blood and guts kind of guy. But it's often kind of said too that it's often kind of implied that they might not have been the greatest scorer necessarily. If you didn't define Mark Messier as a heart and soul guy, which he clearly is, but if he didn't have those characteristics, he'd still be a remarkable offensive player.
Mm-hmm.
And Glenn Anderson, I mean, one of the more interesting characters in Oilers history, but just he could score with the best of them, and he never had an off year. Always reliable. Always could be counted on to pump in whatever it might be, 30, 40, 50 goals in any given season. I'm sounding like a broken record here, but these are guys who just, their accomplishments speak for themselves.
Absolutely. And, I always kind of liked Anderson's sort of carefree, chill attitude. He wasn't a guy that got too worked up, it seems like, and, did these big goal celebrations. And that's sort of similar to me in a sense. When I was playing minor hockey, I loved the big goal celebrations too. And I've always been kind of a laid back guy. So that's, a player that's easy for me to look up to. And I mean, Mark Messier, one of the toughest players in the league probably during his time, could have been one of the best fighters if he fought more, and just such a brilliant skater, could skate like the wind, had a good shot, although he was more of a playmaker than a goal scorer, and he would set up Anderson. Just two phenomenal players. Then you add in Craig Simpson when he arrived just in time to win the Oilers' 4th cup in '88. That's a pretty deadly second line, and the fact that actually was a real line for the Oilers makes this even better, because you don't have to worry about taking players from different eras and sort of shoehorning them in together there. So the other one thing, I don't know if you thought about this, Brian, but this is the only line that on the Oilers, I'm guessing you have the same top line as me, we'll find out in a minute, but this is the only line on this roster where everyone is a 50 goal scorer.
You're correct. Yeah.
Because Messier did it once. I think Anderson did it. I want to say at least 3 times, maybe 4 times. Craig Simpson did it once with the Oilers, obviously. So that's a deadly line when you've got 3 guys who can all contribute offensively like that. And I mean, Mark Messier also, we have to mention his leadership. One of the greatest leaders in the history, if not the greatest captain in NHL history. The only one to captain two teams to a Stanley Cup. So I think the Oilers are in pretty good shape with that second line. And I'll ask you this too. When you were putting together these lines, did you think at all about what they had accomplished, or was that not big for you? Because when I was putting these lines together, I originally had Connor McDavid's line on the second line, and I had Messier's line on the third, but I swapped them around because I said, I'm going to go with the experience here. If this is a game 7, it's okay to drop McDavid down to the third line, because even if the defense is able to shut down the top two lines, they have to go up against Draisaitl and McDavid on the third line, and that's going to be tough for any franchise to go up against. So that was sort of my thinking. How about you?
Very much so, and that's probably why I had McDavid, Eberle, Horcoff, McDavid, Eberle, Draisaitl was the fourth line. Just for that reason, I even had Wade Aaron Smith ahead of them. Even and also too, just that Wade Aaron Smith seemed like a more natural third line to me, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
No, I very much took the same approach. Although I'm going to kind of counter that a little bit with what we have coming up here on what I'm guessing are our matching first lines.
Yeah, so we can both wax poetic about our top line in a second here. So I'll let you take it over and announce them.
Well, we've got in the middle, Wayne Gretzky. Is a gentleman by the name of Wayne Gretzky? Is that who you have?
Seems like an obvious choice. Yeah, I also have number 99.
On one side, we have, I guess, if you will, the Robin to his Batman, or the Batman to his Superman, as I like to go with.
Yeah, as we've talked about that before, definitely.
Yeah, Yuri Curry. I mean, Curry would be on this line no matter what. But I mean, you don't have Gretzky without Curry. You don't have Curry without Gretzky. Those two are, to me, I think, forever linked and inseparable in Oilers lore. And every time you imagine one, you imagine the other. And then on the left wing, I've got Esa Tikkanen, who kind of is he's the wild card in all this, isn't he? Like, he is the one guy that is nobody left, not like anybody else. And I'm assuming you have Esa Tikkanen too?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good. Yeah, he is the one that he's like nobody else. Well, Esa Tikkanen is really like nobody else on planet Earth.
Really?
But he does just jump out in this group of 12 forwards we have, and I know you probably got some things to say about him.
Yeah, you know what I love? That on Twitter he calls himself a legend. I think that's just hilarious. How like I don't know if he is obviously a multi-time Stanley Cup champion, had a great career, but I just love how he just almost speaks so glowingly about himself. Like, you don't often see that from NHL players, but he'll post a picture of himself and then put #legend as the like you would never in a million years see Wayne Gretzky doing that on his social media accounts. But I just think it's hilarious that Tikkanen does that. But yes, such a tough player, such a pest, could get under the skin of the opposition. He loved doing that, loved pissing off the other team, take some dirty shots here and there, and just really just grind it out. And he would try to get the other team, I think, to focus on him. And that opened up more space for Gretzky and Curry to work their magic.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he was the definition of a pest. He was the guy that every other team and subsequently every other fan base in the league hated, but boy, you would love to have him on your team in a second. And the minute he's on your team, you love him. I mean, yeah, he would get under people's skin. His nickname, I believe, if I got this right, I believe he was called the Shadow.
He was
because he would often shadow the other teams.
He even did it to Gretzky when Gretzky was on the Kings.
Exactly.
He shadowed Gretzky. Yeah,
it's like he turned heel on Gretzky.
Exactly.
When he got traded, or maybe Gretzky turned heel because he left town. But anyway,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, he very. I don't know if I'd say underappreciated, but just incredible defensive player. Put up some decent offensive numbers too. Probably part of that was just
30-goal seasons for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and just who we got to play with.
Obviously, When Wayne's putting up 150, 160 assists a season, Tikkanen's bound to get 30 goals just playing on the same line as him.
Well, I think even Dave Semenko scored like 20 or 25 playing with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that doesn't take away the role he played, and you articulated it perfectly. The role he played, the presence he had on that line, how important it was for him to do what he did, and that would allow Gretzky and Curry to do what they did to their maximum ability or maximize their output. So to
Absolutely.
me, if you're going to get the most out of Gretzky and Curry, you've got to have Tikkanen in there.
And what more can you honestly say about the other two? I mean, in my opinion, the greatest duo in NHL history. When I was putting together these lines, I looked at pairs first, and then I added in the other guys. So I had Gretzky, Curry, Messier, Anderson, McDavid, Draisaitl, Waite, Smith, and then I filled in the rest. And you could argue that Taylor Hall is a better player than Esa Tikkanen and would be a more dangerous threat on that top line with Gretzky and Curry. But I elected to still just keep the guys together who were together. Tikkanen did score 30 goals, which Hall didn't. So he has that in his favor. And I mean, Wayne Gretzky, greatest passer in the history of the game, also the all-time leading goal scorer. Jari Kurri, one of the greatest European players ever, one of the greatest right wings ever. Just to have those two together, I mean, both are 70. They both scored 70 goals one year. The only time in NHL history that two players from the same team scored 70 goals in the same season. It'll never happen again. We might not even see, I'm hoping we'll see a 70 goal score again, because I think that would be cool. But we'll never see two guys, I think, in the same season hit 70 goals, let alone on the same team. So you're taking the most deadly offensive duo that in the history of the game, and the fact that you're able to have that as your top line go up against any defense, it's going to cause them a lot of fits.
We were talking about that 50-goal milestone for a defenseman. I think that 70 goals from two forwards on the same team is even infinitely less possible of happening again than that 50 goals for a defenseman, and that is pretty hard to imagine too. But It would be great. It would be cool to see somebody hit 70 goals again. And you know what? There's a guy playing for the Oilers right now that might just have it in him. There's two guys playing for, actually, I guess I should say. But one guy who's really seemed to develop a nose for finding the back of the net.
Absolutely. I think it would be really cool if Connor and Leon could both score 50 goals one year. I think that would be something that would, in my opinion, they're the greatest duo of this generation anyway. But for them to take that next step as they get into their mid-20s now, the next few years are going to be really exciting, and hopefully those 50-goal, 100-plus point seasons will be paired with a couple deep playoff runs, and hopefully ending with a Stanley Cup. So just overall, just a thought about your roster overall, how it looks and all the components you put in.
I don't think we were talking about this as we were putting our list together, and if you applied this concept for every team in the NHL, and let's say we go with the same philosophy that you and I took of going with guys that played together, have that chemistry with one another. So effectively, rather than just taking a dream all-star team, like you mentioned, I mean, because I thought about having Hall alongside Gretzky and Curry, and just how unbelievable.
We're on the same page there.
yeah, but I elected to go with the chemistry and the history and that balance, rather than just do like a straight dream team without respect for eras. If you did that for every team in NHL history, I don't think, and we were talking about this, so maybe you've got more thoughts on it now, but I don't think you could find another team outside of maybe the Habs that could rival this lineup.
Up front, the only ones I can think of, I think that the Canadians don't have the type of guys like Gretzky and
they don't have the explosiveness, right?
No, but they have so many greats. Like they have Jean Beliveau, they have Guy Lafleur, they have Maurice Richard. I'm like selling them short if I don't say that they have all this incredible talent. So there is just an unbelievable array of players to pick from over their 111-year history. I mean,
but the thing is too, they can only take 12.
They can only take 12, but
their 30th best player in history might be better than the Oilers' 30th best player in history.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that their depth, like overall, like if you looked at players 1 through 30, I agree with you. I think that you would see a big drop off after say 15 compared to from their 15 to 30. But in the top half, I think the Oilers will still they're like the top three lines. The fact that we have McDavid and Draisaitl, 2 Art Ross Trophy winners, on the third line speaks to how deep this lineup is. Well, for my lineup anyway. And you had them on the fourth line, which even says more about your lineup.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Montreal would be one that could potentially beat the Oilers, but it could go either way. Boston would be very tough. I think once again they have some great forwards up front, but I think the Oilers would still have a better group. Where Boston would be tough for the Oilers is on defense. They could have a top pairing of Bobby Orr and Ray Bourque, and a second pairing of Zdeno Chara and Eddie Shore. Now that's as good as any top four out there, even Montreal's.
That would, the one thing that I would say to that though is that would involve disregarding errors, because those guys never did play together. Like if we actually went, like you could have one defensive pairing with Orr, one with Bourque, and one with Chara, and that would be unbelievable. But then who would be because we could do the same thing for the Oilers, but we decided to keep it within their respective eras too.
Well, sort of, but like you could, in this scenario, you can use a time machine and put all these guys together at the same time. Like there's no restrictions. You could have had McDavid on Gretzky's line if you wanted, but at the same time, I think it's better to just, keep Gretzky with Curry and keep McDavid with Draisaitl. It just makes more sense to have those guys together. Obviously, on a power play, if we put together the Oilers power play, I would probably go with, on the blue line, you'd have, on the first power play anyway, I'd go with Coffey as the only D-man, and I'd have McDavid out there, which seems ridiculous to keep Pronger on the bench, but that's just how deep this team is. You put Coffey and McDavid on the back end, and up front, I would have Gretzky, Curry, and Draisaitl. And then you've got Wayne setting up behind the net, and because Curry and Draisaitl are opposite hands, they can both be setting up on their off wing, and he's got 2 lethal shooters that are setting up for the one-timer. I mean, find me a better power play than that anywhere.
Yeah, you can't. The other thing too, I don't know if this crossed your mind when you put your list together. Did you think of what the all-time 3-man overtime unit might look like?
We talked about that too. I mean, if you want to do Gretzky, McDavid, Coffey,
there's so many different combinations. It is so it's so cool to think what those guys from the 80s would have been able to do in the 3-man overtime scenario. Think of Gretzky, Curry, Coffey. Just throw them out there, and the game's over in 5 seconds.
Yeah, like if they won the face-off, it would be very difficult. Especially how with all the open ice, which Wayne never got to experience. So that would have been something to see. I think that when I look at my lineup here, the only dream teams that I could see, like we were pushing them just to tie back in, like Montreal would be one. Boston would be another. Detroit is another great team with like Stevie Y and Gordie Howe. They also have Paul Coffey on their team as well, who won a Norris there. So, that team is very strong. There's a long list of goaltenders and defensemen they could use too. But I still think they beat Detroit. An interesting one is Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh has Yager, Crosby, Malkin. Pick a goalie. Their defense is good. They'd have Ron Francis, Kevin Stevens. There's a lot of talent there to it. And then more guys from the later years, 2009, 16, 17. I mean, there's so many to pick from. So that team would be very difficult. But I think the Oilers would still beat them. In my head, I say the only 2 teams that really push them are Montreal and Boston, I think.
I think it would be a fascinating exercise one of these days. And if we keep going on this much longer without sports, we might have to start doing a list for each team and actually have an all-time.
Yeah,
I think it would be a lot of fun, because I think we're probably. I know that we're surely overlooking some teams, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it would be so cool to just once you start doing this and really thinking about it, because you know how hard it was for us to just do this for the Oilers.
exactly.
So I think that would be an absolute blast, and a lot of fun, and I hope we don't have the time to do it, but
No, we want real hockey
if we
back,
do
but
it might be a cool way to kill a
these
few months.
right, these dream team scenarios are awesome though, and I'd like to see EA Sports create all the players and simulate it. And just see how it would actually turn out. Put everyone at their prime when they were with these teams, and just let's play the game and see. A Battle of Alberta would be awesome, and then you get all the Flames guys like Theo Fleury, Ginlin, Nieuwendyk, Mullen, Otto, Conroy, Jelena, whoever you want to pick from all the eras, Goudreau, Monahan, and just have them battle against the all-time Oilers. I still think we would crush them, but that would maybe be half the fun, is watching the Oilers dream team just destroy the Flames dream
Calgary
team.
would have if we're going to be honest with it, I mean, you look at guys like Gilmore, Fleury, Nieuwendyk, Brett
Even
Hall played for
Brett
them.
Hall, yeah,
Al McInnes on the back end. They would have a pretty dynamite team too. Jerome again,
definitely.
Lanny McDonald. That's another team too that maybe we just don't want to give them credit because they're Calgary, but boy, they would have a stacked lineup.
I read all the Sportsnet ones for the Canadian teams, and the Flames look good. I wasn't as impressed with Vancouver or Toronto's lineup, and that's more indicative of Toronto, who's been around for 103 years, and that their lineup was there's talent there, but just unremarkable for a team that's been around a century, I would say. So that, I would take it. They might have twice the cups that Boston has, but I would take Boston's dream team to beat Toronto's dream team any day.
I would agree. I didn't really, when we were thinking about this, I was saying, okay, well, automatically you'd have to consider all the original 6 teams just because they have such a greater pool of players to draw from. But the Leafs ultimately didn't really get into the mix for me of a team I thought could beat the Oilers, and neither, to be really honest, did the Rangers.
Well, yeah, I mean, those, the Rangers have some guys too. Like, they'd have Brian Leetch, they would have Messier. You could take an older Gretzky, but once again, if you're using Gretzky, you don't get to use 1984 Gretzky. You have to use 1997 Gretzky, who's still almost 100-point player. But you're not getting the real full package that we had in Edmonton for a decade. So it would be interesting to see this all played out. But I think we should now, as fun as this exercise was, and I appreciate you doing that with me, Brian, I've been looking forward to this for a while, move into another kind of interesting topic that we have, and that's our top 5 jerseys from the 90s, which we talked about on the last episode that we did. And after all these months, we get to finally do this. So we'll count down from 5. I think I'm almost equally as excited for this as the rosters. How about you?
I am, and I think we were so bang on identical for much of the rosters. I can't imagine that it's going to happen with these jerseys. I was stunned because I've gone way off the grid on some of these picks here. So
we're going to be counting down. Brian will say his 5th, I'll say my 5th, and we'll work down to our favorite. The one rule that we had for this that we established before was that you couldn't pick 2 jerseys from one club. So there's no multiples here. I would be too tempted to have at least 2 Oiler jerseys in my list. I can't speak for Brian if he would have 2 from the same team either. But just to make this fair, I said picking 1 jersey from each team and your top 5. So Brian, first off, do you have any honorable mentions before we get into your top 5?
Oh, I probably do, but I didn't even write them down.
Oh, that's okay. I just thought off the top of your head if you had any.
No, I probably have about 40 honorable mentions because this was a difficult exercise.
Okay.
This was even tougher than coming up with the lines. I eventually put some limitations on myself to kind of narrow myself down, so I decided, okay, I'm going to only do jerseys that were introduced in the 90s. So the first season that a team wore them, it had to be in the 90s. So I couldn't say if somebody brought a jersey in 88 and they wore it until 96, it wasn't going to count. It had to be a definitively 90s jersey. And then ultimately, because I think hockey jerseys are the nicest jerseys out there, and I think they
Yeah.
just because there's more.
There's a
They allow
logo on the front.
detail.
It's the only jersey in the Big Four that actually has the crest on the chest of the jersey.
Exactly,
And I
and
wish the
more.
NBA would change that, because it's not like it's in football where there's too many players on the court that they need to have numbers on the front and back. I think that it would be awesome if the NBA, and we have seen it with some teams over the years, but I would like to, every team has a logo. I would like to see it universally put on the front of every NBA jersey instead of just having the font and then the number underneath.
Yeah, the NBA started to play around a lot more with that in recent years, but back in the '90s, that really wasn't the case. It was basically your script team name, nickname, or city name, and then the number, and you might have a patch, but that would be about it. So, and the same thing could be said for football jerseys too. I just think hockey jerseys, just because there's the most space to work with, you have full sleeves. They just allow for more creativity and more details. So hockey jerseys have always been my favorite. So because of that, I said, okay, it's going to be in the '90s, and I'm just going to go with hockey because ultimately
Okay.
it would probably be my 5 favorites anyway. So
I got one. I got one question for you before I forget.
yes,
Do you know? I don't know if you've ever paid attention to this or noticed this, but when I was thinking about it, I was looking at all the logos for all the leagues when I was making this to try and go through it. Basketball is the one sport where they try to encompass a basketball into the logo. There are ones like the Pittsburgh Penguins logo where the penguin does have a hockey stick in his hand, and there are probably other ones that I can't think off the top of my head, but there are so many basketball logos where a basketball is part of the logo. Did you ever notice that?
back in even just back as far as the '90s, really. But I mean, especially if you go to the NBA in its earliest days, from when they started in '46 and then up through the decades, even through the '90s, it would. I, off the top of my head, could not think of a team that did not incorporate a basketball into the logo, whether it was detailed as incorporated into part of their script, or it was actually a logo with somebody dribbling a ball, or the ball with the backdrop, or whatever it may be. It's interesting that you point that out, because I mean, yeah, obviously that certainly isn't the case in hockey. In football,
I'm actually
I can
bringing
only
up
think of a couple
sports.
off the top of my head, and in baseball, not really at all. I think part of it is basketball, with its panels, lends itself very nicely to being part of a
Yeah.
logo. But yeah,
I'm pulling up the sports logos page right now to just kind of check this out. And just quickly, the only ones I don't see with a basketball in it: Atlanta Hawks, Charlotte Hornets, Chicago Bulls, Cleveland Cavaliers.
and these are all teams that in their previous logos almost always had a basketball.
Yeah.
So
Memphis
yeah,
Grizzlies, Milwaukee Bucks, and that Portland Trailblazers. That's it.
actually, the Blazers do form depending on which logo you're looking at. The Blazers do have a logo that pretty much
okay.
pretty much any
I
team's
just
secondary logo.
at least has it.
Yeah.
I just pulled
So
up the
it's
main logos here that they used in
right.
2019-20, but yeah, there's about 5 that don't, but almost everyone else. I mean, even Golden State, the circle, you could argue that is referencing a basketball. I don't know if maybe that's digging too deep into it. But like even the Lakers, I think they are considered to have an iconic logo, and basically all it is a streaking font on top of a yellow basketball.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And there's a lot of hidden basketballs and old logos too that you might not even realize at first, like the old Portland Trailblazers logo, for example. So it's I guess that's something that's unique to basketball, but they certainly, as with all leagues, and it's a lot of it is just merchandising and marketing opportunities, have expanded and created all sorts of new logos and different jerseys and uniforms and looks over the years, and I have no problem with it, because it's always fun to I think we're both jersey aficionados here, and we love looking at logos and stuff like that.
I loved a lot of the logos that the NBA had back when I was in high school. Like some of them are just atrocious now. Like the Los Angeles Clippers, the Denver Nuggets new one, the Sacramento Kings, like all of these teams have had better logos in the past. So that's yeah, there's some not great ones out there. I don't know if you agree with me on some of them or not, but
well, some of them, a lot of them, it becomes so atrocious they become beautiful in their own way.
yeah, exactly. It's those jerseys. Like even one that won't be on our list here today, the Todd McFarlane jersey. Some people think it's the worst jersey they've ever seen, and other people talk about how much they love it. I love it personally. I have that jersey in my closet. I'm glad I have one. And I even have a knockoff Walmart one too that I had when I was younger. So I have two versions of it. I actually got it at Sports Check now that I think about it. But yeah, so there's some that are going to be considered ugly to some and beautiful to others. But we will now dive into our list. Before you give me your top 5 or your number 5, I wrote down a couple honorable mentions. The Anaheim Mighty Ducks original from '93. And that has less to do with the NHL team as it does to the movie The Mighty Ducks, which I grew up with, and I think a lot of '90s kids loved those movies, especially if you were a hockey fan. And just when they come out of the dressing room in D2, the Mighty Ducks, and they've changed from the Team USA jerseys into the Mighty Ducks to take on Iceland. That one had to be at least an honorable mention. I thought about even including it in my top 5, but because it wasn't as much of a reason for the actual NHL team, I left it out. And the other one is the Saskatchewan Roughriders green jersey. Growing up, everyone's a Rough Rider fan in Saskatchewan, so just to have that in there, it's I like the other versions of the Rough Riders jersey better, but that was the one they were wearing for their '89 Grey Cup team, so I'll keep that one in there as well. But now moving on to you, Brian, number 5 on your list.
Number 5, I am going with the Rangers' third jersey that was introduced in 1997-98.
Okay.
That's the Statue of Liberty jersey. I
okay.
I always liked the logo, and it's one of the. It's not the jersey that Wayne Gretzky was wearing in his last game, but it was one of the jerseys. It was their third jersey in his final season in '98-99. I liked them. I think at the time it was kind of an adjustment, a darkening of the red. It was a darker version of the red and blue of the Rangers. I thought it just looked really sharp. It's one of those ones now that in retrospect doesn't look as great, but I remember I just absolutely loved it at the time, and I still do like the logo and the significance of it being from Gretzky's final season to doesn't hurt either. So
yeah, it's
that is
pretty
my number
cool.
5.
I like that jersey too, and they changed their home jersey that year. The collar on their after in Wayne's last 2 years, they changed the collar and the sleeves sort of on the Rangers home jersey as well. But yeah, that Rangers one, when a few years ago I wanted to get a Gretzky Rangers jersey. Actually, this is probably more like 2011, so a while ago. Because I wanted to have a jersey from every team Gretzky played for. I now do from. I have multiple Oiler ones, but I wanted to have from the Kings, Blues, Rangers, All-Star, Team Canada, everything. Even WHA, I have his Racers jersey. But I wanted to get a Rangers one, and I was debating whether or not to get the Statue of Liberty one because I thought that was such a cool jersey. But ultimately, I went with the royal blue one that he wore in his last game at Madison Square Garden. So that one, that was the one I chose. But good pick for you on number 5.
I got to ask, what Blues jersey did you get for him?
I have the white St. Louis Blues jersey, and I was actually given that as a gift. So I didn't even know I was getting it, but that was a cool one to have. It's the the one with the big trumpet on the sleeves and everything. Yeah. They sort of brought that back this year as a retro one, the blue version, but I have the white version from that era. So that's a really cool one too, and something I thought about including on this list as well. So my number 5 is the Vancouver Grizzlies turquoise jersey that they brought out in 1995.
One of those so ugly it's good, and the nostalgia value to it. If I were including basketball, that would be right. That would be threatening to be right up there. Yeah.
I thought it was so cool. I remember on my 8th birthday, which would have been January 1997. So my 8th birthday would have been the day after Connor McDavid was born. And that for that birthday, I got a Toronto Raptors hat. This is what my dad got me. He got me a Toronto Raptors hat and a Vancouver Grizzlies pennant. So he wanted me to have both Canadian NBA teams. So I thought that was really cool. I still have both. And from there, I went on to get a Vancouver Grizzlies poster at one of those school book fairs that they'd have all that sports stuff there. And I got a Big Country Bryant Reeves poster, which I think I still have buried somewhere in a closet at my parents' house. And I always thought it was such a cool logo, and it was too bad that the Memphis Grizzlies didn't keep it, because I think it's iconic. You still see people around wearing Vancouver Grizzlies hats, and
you're talking to one of them.
Yeah, and there you go. And you know what? Like the fact that they still make them just speaks, like, the team was only around for 6 seasons and they weren't successful, but people will still rock a Vancouver Grizzlies hat. I mean, when I was in Edmonton at the end of February, my buddy and I went to United Cycle, as we always do, and we're there just to look around, and sometimes we'll find something. And we were in United Cycle next to the big Stanley Cup statue, which I always love to go see there too. They had a ton of retro 90s jerseys in there, and one of them was the Vancouver Grizzlies turquoise jersey from that era. So that's just a jersey that still resonates with fans, and that people who weren't even, like, I mean, anyone in high school now wasn't even alive when they played. That's how crazy it was, and kids are still wearing it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we're actually coming up. It's just this weekend is the 19th anniversary of their last game, and so I
saw you had a tweet the other day. You had a tweet about Steve Francis.
Their last home game was on April
14th.
I think I want to say the 14th to 2001. Their final game period is April 12th, and then April 18th is their last game ever. So I mean, it's been 19 years. It's been going on a long time, and there's 2 things I want to live to see come back, and that's the Grizzlies to Vancouver, and that is the McFarland jersey to the Oilers.
That's awesome. And another thing, I mean, I'm a big Justin Timberlake fan. You and I were actually DMing, talking about JT not too long ago, and he was actually one of the part owners at one time, I believe, for the Grizzlies. I don't know if he still is.
I think he still has a minority share, but
I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Yeah,
because I know he's a big college basketball fan too. He's I can't believe I'm going to forget. There's University in Memphis, isn't there?
There's University of Memphis, which is coached now by Penny Hardaway. And
are they the Tigers?
Penny
Hardaway, nice.
Volunteers, which he could be. They're a very good team.
No, I don't think it is. Is there? Are they called the Tigers, Memphis?
Yeah.
Then that's his team. I know that's his team. So
there you go.
I was just I didn't want to be wrong on that, but I knew if anyone was going to know the name of the college basketball team, there would be you. So there we go, number 5. We'll move on now to your number 4 jersey from the 90s.
So I'm embracing the 90s and all their 90s-ness when I go with this here. If you hadn't figured that one out already, based on my first pick, I believe was only used the 1 season, but it's the Coyotes' 3rd jersey with the Coyote head.
Okay.
This one is just so out there, so different from everything else. I always had a soft spot for
I can picture
the Coyotes. But this one is just like, the colors are so different from what everybody else did. They went with a very desert motif, and I like the desert motif stuff. And maybe it doesn't translate well to a hockey jersey, I'll admit that. But I do like the desert colors and sort of the desert theme. And this was just like so, really there's been nothing else done like this. Like even the way the Coyote head is designed, like it's almost like it's almost like abstract. This has got to be if you could tell me that this is the ugliest jersey you've ever seen, and I wouldn't blame you, but no one can deny how unique it is.
Oh, absolutely! It's I just took a peek at it on Google Images. It's an eyesore. So, but you know what? When my best friend in elementary school was a Phoenix Coyotes fan, and I remember he had several Phoenix Coyotes jerseys, and I believe this was one of them. And I remember when he would wear it to school, and I would just say like, "Oh my God, my my McFarland Oilers jersey is way better than that, and we get into debates over whose was worse or whatever. But yeah, that's an interesting one that I would never have guessed that you would pick that.
Yeah, well, there you go. So big surprise number one, but to me that just defines hockey jerseys in the '90s as well. I
Definitely.
think. So yeah. It didn't last too long. It's funny too. We're referring to them as the Phoenix Coyotes, of course, because it's already been a number of years since they've been known as that.
Yep. So my number 4 is the Toronto Blue Jays white jersey.
That's a beauty.
From their World Series teams. And whenever I've been watching some of those old Blue Jays games on Sportsnet the last couple weeks. They've been showing games from the 92 and 93 World Series. I know TSN now has plans to start airing some Expos games, which is pretty cool
and which is another great jersey from back then.
Definitely. Definitely a cool jersey. And for the Blue Jays, I have a Toronto Blue Jays Roberto Alomar jersey that I actually got in Toronto a few years ago. So very nice addition to my collection. And when my dad is a huge Blue Jays fan, and baseball wasn't my number one sport growing up, but I always still loved watching the Jays, and the Anaheim Angels are also my number 2 team. I still call them the Anaheim Angels, even though they're now the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, which is
they've had
silly.
4 names in my lifetime.
Yeah,
they were
California Angels. Yeah.
Then it was the Los Angeles Angels of.
Yeah.
No,
then they were the Los Angeles. Then they were the Anaheim Angels.
Right.
Now the Anaheim Angels.
There was a time when they were the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
That's what they are right now. No. That's what they were. You're right. That's what they were, and then they just became the LA Angels.
Yes. So
which doesn't make sense.
Identity crisis going on there.
But what's weird? There was a time when they used to call them the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim too.
Yes.
In the 90s, which is also weird. So I don't know why, because Anaheim and LA are just a stone's throw away from each other, really. But
as it is now, they pretty much kind of swallowed each other up, right? The distance between them, or the space.
Exactly.
There is really nothing between them. It's just all.
No. And I've been to Anaheim 5 times in my life, and this most recent trip that I went 2 years ago, actually this month, was the first time that I'd been out to Angel Stadium. And when I was there, I didn't realize how close it is to the Duck Pond, the Honda Center. Like you can see one from the other, and it's kind of not out in the middle of nowhere, but it's definitely a little out of the way. And just they're not far away from each other at all. And those when I was looking over it, as much as I was like excited to see Angel Stadium for the first time, it was kind of cool to also look over at the Honda Center. And I thought, there's been multiple WrestleManias there where one of my heroes, Shawn Michaels, won the WWE title in '96. A boyhood dream realized, and also a place where the Oilers won the Campbell Conference Bowl in 2000 and 2006. So just some pretty historic moments I was looking at, thinking when I saw that arena.
That is really cool. I didn't realize they were that close.
Yeah, they are. They are very close. They're like a 2-minute drive away from each other. We had an Uber driver take us out there from the hotel. We always stay like across the street from Disneyland whenever we go there. So it's actually not too far away. So realistically, you could go to a game and still swing back into the heart of Disney pretty quickly if you're there for a trip. So I debated actually putting the Angels jersey from the movie Angels in the outfield, which I also loved as a kid, into my list, but I still elected to go with the Jays. So we'll go to your next one.
My next one. This one is going to be another head scratcher for everybody, because the memories of the team that wore them are nothing but misery, or when they wore them are nothing but misery. But it's the 1996 World Cup and 1998 Olympic Team Canada hockey jersey. I love this jersey. I had one. Now, of course, they lost the '96 World Cup to the U.S., blew the 1-0, or they've won game 1, lost the last 2 games in Canada. had to watch the Americans celebrate on Canadian soil. And
Yeah.
of course, I don't need to talk about the 1998 Olympics.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love this jersey. I had this jersey. I thought it was so cool at the time. So I think a lot of it is nostalgia.
The red one or the white one?
I am going with the white one.
Okay.
The white one for this. And this was also, again, not bringing back great memories, but this was the last Team Canada jersey that Wayne Gretzky wore, sitting on the bench in the shootout.
Yeah, in 1998, his final appearance for Canada. That's right.
Yeah. But he had a lot greater moments for Canada. But I just thought this jersey was so cool. And again, it was very 90s. It was very 90s, but I thought it was a sharp look for the time. Really forward fashion thinking by Team Canada. And I think this was kind of they had a pretty much generic jersey up until this point. If you look at any of the old Canada national games, whether it's Canada Cup or the Olympics, from this point on, they got really creative anytime they went to an Olympics or World Cup or what might have you.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the things Bob Nicholson really gets credit for more than anything, is really growing the Hockey Canada brand in the late 90s. Like, obviously, they wanted to improve the hockey product because they had lost in back-to-back major tournaments in 96 and 98, and obviously won in 02. That I have that Canada jersey, by the way. I think that's the best Canada jersey other than the original Canada Cup ones. I have the red one. I have a Ryan Smith.
Okay. Yeah, I love that jersey.
Which he also wore at many World Championships. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, no, if this was if it was that would probably be my favorite all-time Canada jersey. I counted that one as a 2000s. Did you like the third jersey they had for the 2002 Olympics?
The black one with you know what? It was okay, but they kind of had that, like, the maple leaf, like the red maple leaf on it. It's kind of got that, I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost got more of that leafy pattern, if that makes any sense. Anyone who can Google this will know.
Exactly what you mean.
And it's so similar to the Toronto Maple Leafs third jersey. Their alternate jersey at that time. Because they were also using kind of an old school Leafs logo. If anyone goes back and looks at one of the Leafs jerseys from like the 60s, or even their current jersey, how they've modified their crest, that's what it was very similar towards. So didn't really love that. And also, I'm okay with black being a secondary color. But for Team Canada, when our flag is just red and white, you either should go all red and white or have black as a very small trim. I mean, you look at the Americans, they have three colors, so it's a little easier. We're a two-color flag. But also, I think two-tone jerseys are also very, very sharp looking as well. So, but I think we've just been so accustomed to Canada wearing black helmets and black hockey pants over the last 2 decades. It's just become part of our identity. And I will say it's better than when they wore blue hockey pants back in the 80s. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't want it to be the main color.
And then, of course, in later years in the World Cup, they go on to where, although these were, to be fair, accurate throwback.
I already know which one you're talking about.
Mustard yellow and a green jersey.
Yeah, and I have a friend who's a Winnipeg sports fan, and he has that jersey because those were the 1920 Winnipeg Falcons who wore those. And yes, quite ugly as well. But I remember that in the 2004 World Cup that summer. So that's interesting you bring that up.
We could do a whole other conversation on Canadian jerseys over the years too. I mean, I think I didn't.
I would like to do that.
The look with the blue pants. I didn't mind that look, but I understand what you're saying. Not in the context of a Team Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll move on now to my third jersey, which is the Pittsburgh Penguins black jersey from their Stanley Cup teams. And I always thought that was a really cool looking jersey too. And I almost put the Buffalo Sabres one in this spot because the jersey that I grew up playing in was the same one that the Sabres wore in the late 90s, minus the logo. We had a different logo, but the one that they wore when they went to the Cup in 99. But for me, I love that Pittsburgh Penguins black jersey. I wouldn't consider myself a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, but I do appreciate their great history with Lemieux and Yager and now Crosby and Malkin. I would love Draisaitl and McDavid to have the careers that Malkin and Crosby have had. So fingers crossed on that everything turns out. But yeah, actually in 2004, as we're talking about, McDonald's had a contest where there was an authentic Mario Lemieux Pittsburgh Penguins jersey from that 91 Cup team. And the jersey, you could take a little form and you would write down your name and your phone number and you would stuff it in the box. And if they pulled your name out, you would win the jersey. Now, I'll tell you this. I cheated the system a little bit here and did actually win that jersey. There was I would say 4 or 5 stacks of paper there. And I grabbed one whole stack and put it in my jacket pocket and took it home. And I'm not kidding you. I filled out 50 pieces of paper. So the next time we came back to McDonald's, it was on the big table there, and I kind of subtly pulled out all 50 sheets from 2 pockets and stuffed them in. And wouldn't you know it, a week later, I got a phone call from McDonald's that I had that I had won the jersey. And I came and they took a picture of me and put it up on the wall.
Oh, wow.
Claiming my jersey. And I still have that picture too. But that's how I won my Mario Lemieux Pittsburgh Penguins jersey. So in retrospect, maybe not the most honest thing to do at age 15, but I ended up taking home the jersey that I really wanted.
That's a tremendous story.
A free, authentic jersey.
Story.
Yeah, and I'll tie this in. It isn't also the first time I did it. 4 years earlier, Burger King had a similar promotion. I was 11 at the time, so this is 2000. And one of my favorite shows when I was a little kid was Dragon Ball Z, and they had a shirt that had all the characters from the series on it. And I did a similar thing where I stuffed the box and won it. And then 4 years later, did the exact same thing with this jersey. But I'll say those are my only 2 times where I kind of didn't maybe honestly win it. But I got like a free $200 jersey out of it, and there was no rule saying that you couldn't take more sheets. So I said, well, if I have the opportunity, I'm going to go for it. So that's one of my funny stories from back then.
That's great. The best part about this is the fact that you actually won. Like, I still wouldn't, like, if you can imagine the number of people that would have gone through there and the number of entries, you probably, with 50 entries, your odds were probably still long, but the fact that you won makes this fantastic story.
Yeah, so I probably had
a photo and put it up on the wall. It's like to say, don't
they did
this guy.
Don't exactly.
It's like, if you see this guy coming back in here again, don't let him grab any entries for him.
Yeah. It's funny because at the same time, I remember after high school one day walking through Sportsnet and seeing the exact, not Sportsnet, Sport Check, and seeing the exact same Mario Lemieux jersey up there for like, I don't know, it was like $220 or something at the time. And then I go into McDonald's and then just end up taking one home as a free gift. So I thought, you know what, that all the money that I'd spent at McDonald's up to that point, it's like I just kind of got it back with that jersey. So thank you McDonald's for that. And
and if you're listening to McDonald's, you owe me like 40 jerseys for my lifetime. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, we'll move on now to your number 2 jersey, Brian.
My number 2, this actually has a McDonald's tie-in to it as well.
Okay.
Believe it or not. The 1994 NHL All-Star jerseys.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you remember this. You may have seen these later on, like in collectible shops or something, but McDonald's did a promotion where they had the Muppets wearing these jerseys. And there was like, like 4 different ones. I have Fozzie Bear is the only one I remember, but I think there was like Kermit and probably Miss Piggy and Gonzo. But 1994 was the first year they went away from those famous Campbell and Wales conference jerseys that we've all seen.
Are these the red and blue ones? Are you talking about the red and blue jerseys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I remember them coming out for, I think it was the 75th anniversary of the NHL. So that must be it. Okay. I think that was when I remember a few years ago, Drake was wearing one when they showed him in the crowd at the All-Star game. He still had one. So those are very cool jerseys. I know the one you're talking about. It's almost like, are they striped down the sleeve? Like there's a bunch of stripes.
I'm trying to remember now. I'm just bringing it up here. They were the ones that they wore them, I think, at 2 All-Star games. I want to say
Okay.
94 and 96.
Okay.
But we'll just consult our friendly. And if anyone's not aware of NHLuniforms.com, this is the greatest thing, the greatest website
Yes,
out
I've
there.
seen that one
If
before.
this is your jam, if NHL jerseys are your jam, this is it. But yeah, they were when they finally went. Well, I shouldn't say finally because I mean I think those old Campbell and Wales conference jerseys are classics too. But they were so they were actually no, they were the ones that were the turquoise and white and then purple and black.
Okay, I'm thinking of different ones then. Sorry
Yeah,
about
you're
that.
thinking
Yeah.
of I know the ones you're thinking of too, and those are very cool jerseys as well. But I think those were I think those had some retro kind of throwback tie-in
Well, they were
to them,
supposed to
but
be. It was. I want to say it was 92 for the 75th because that would make sense.
that would make total sense.
Or
Yeah.
1917 until 1992 would be 75 years. I'm googling the ones you're talking about right now. It's like they're almost the same shape as those Dallas Stars jerseys. How it was like the
Yeah,
shape
they
of a
are.
star.
And they're the first ones. This was the first year that they were known as the West and Eastern Conference instead of the Campbell and Wales. So it was all kind of part and parcel with that.
That's right. Well, that was the year 93, 94, I believe, was the first year that they stopped calling them the Campbell and Wales conferences, right?
Right. It was a really
Okay.
transformative year for the NHL. I think if you want to call it the Americanization or the pulp culturalization of the NHL with the with the expansion of the Ducks and the Panthers and kind of embracing all the Hollywood stuff that came with having the franchise in Anaheim, and it was really the NHL was stepping into whether you think it's for better or for worse. This was a different era for them. And it's really embodied in these jerseys, but it's just a kind of a nostalgic thing for me, and I just love them, and they wore them. I
So
don't think there was an All-Star game in '95 because of the lockout,
there wasn't, right?
but in
That would have been why.
'96 they used them again. And if anyone remembers the '96 All-Star game, it was when Pat Bloom scored the game-winning goal, or was it Owen Nolan?
Okay.
Owen Nolan scored.
Oh,
the
he
famous
called a
game-winning
shot.
goal.
He
In
was the one
San
who called.
Jose.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Babe Ruth
some bit
called a
of
shot.
random trivia there.
So, are you going with the purple one or the teal one, sort of?
I will go with purple simply because it was the West for that season.
Okay, perfect.
So I'll rep the West.
You'll rep the West, and I don't know if an Oiler player played in that All-Star game or wore that.
Yeah, that was back in the years when they had to. Actually, this will be a good trivia question for you. I'll see if you can get this one. Back then, you had to have a player.
Which we are back to now, but there was a period where you didn't have to, obviously. But now I'm glad they're back to that.
Yeah, I do like the idea of having everyone represented too, even though it may mean that
some great players get left out.
Get left out, but I do. So yeah, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that one. Maybe while you're
okay.
Your,
93, 94. I want to say Doug Waite because I think he had a 70-point season that year. I think that was his breakout year in Edmonton.
That was his breakout year, but that wasn't it. And I'm just going to confirm here first that I've got this right.
I got to think who else could be on that. A representative for the Oilers. Could it have been Bill Ranford? Was he? No, it was. I don't even remember if he was with the team still in 93.
And before I get too far down a road I can't turn back here, I'm just confirming that I've got this right.
It would make sense that it was Waite if they had one.
Okay, yeah. I'll give you a hint. He was a team captain.
He was a team captain by then?
No.
Okay, not by then.
Or he might have been this. No.
Okay, well then
this season. He might have been the team captain this season.
Unless it was Craig McTavish, who was traded that year. I didn't think he would be an All-Star though.
Shane Corson.
Oh, you stumped me there. I would not have got Shane Corson. Like I know he had the 1 year that he was the captain. Yeah, that doesn't make sense that he would have been the guy.
I mean, out of all the All-Stars and all the captains,
probably one of the least memorable captains too. I think he only wore
the least memorable All-Star they've had too.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was only captain the 1 year, right?
I'm not even sure if it's the whole year because I think he was traded halfway through the season. He was captain, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember reading that wasn't a popular choice or something, but yeah, I wouldn't have got that one. He's quite forgettable. Yeah, those, they seemed like lean years until the decade of darkness, and then we really saw what lean years are like. But hopefully we can put that behind us now. Okay, so my number 2 jersey, I went with the Los Angeles Kings black jersey. Now, this was technically introduced in '88, but I still associate it more as a '90s jersey with definitely the Gretzky era overall, but their run to the final in 1993. And also, for Oilers fans who were around at the time, it probably bothers them to see Gretzky in any jersey other than an Oiler jersey. But because I was born after the trade, about 5 months after the trade, I grew up with only knowing Gretzky of playing for several teams. I didn't know him just with one franchise. So when I think about Wayne Gretzky in that jersey, like that was the team that he spent most of the '90s with. And actually, the first jersey that I ever got was for my first birthday. So that would have been January 1990. And my dad got me an LA Kings Wayne Gretzky jersey, which is like baby size, So it was, I still have it. It's tiny, and there's pictures of me wearing it. And I just, that jersey means a lot to me. I now have the, which I got years ago, the Wayne Gretzky LA Kings adult size jersey from that era, and I just love that uniform. I think it's so sharp. While some people say it's kind of copied off the Oakland Raiders, I just think the silver and black is really sharp. And while I do wish that Wayne would have spent his entire career in Edmonton, it's a jersey that I still love, and I'm glad to have it in my collection. It's probably the reason I'm a Gretzky fan. My dad starting me out in 1990 as getting that Gretzky jersey with the Kings. So it is a sentimental one to me, and I had to have it on my list.
I think that's I can't argue with any of that, and that's a classic jersey, especially when it has number 99 on the back of it.
Definitely. So we'll now go on to what we've all been waiting for. It's been building up to this over the last 2 hours here. What is your number 1 jersey of the '90s?
I suddenly think we might have the same one here. But
okay.
I've been going way off the grid for all my other picks, but I have one that I just absolutely adore, and it's an Oilers jersey, obviously, because I'm an Oilers fan as well. But I just love the look. It is their home jersey that they introduced in 97-98, or pardon me, 97-98. Now they originally brought this jersey
the white one,
all white, because they brought this jersey in 96-97, but
it had the shoulder patches.
Shoulder patch. I prefer the non-shoulder patch version.
So do I.
I'm going with the 97-98 version.
Okay, and I have the Edmonton Oilers copper and blue away jersey, which later became their home jersey in 2003 when they switched. But so we both have the same series of jerseys. Just you're going with the home and I'm going with the away.
And I'm sure in both our cases, because we weren't allowed to pick the same or 2 jerseys from one team, it's probably like 1A and 1B. We just have to pick one, right?
I mean, honestly, I wanted to take the one that they won the cup with in 1990. I think that's probably the nicest Oiler jersey ever. Is the classic orange and royal blue jersey that when they won the cup in Boston Garden in 1990. But I think you and I will both agree that jersey is mainly associated with the 1980s, or you could say even in the 2010s when the Oilers brought it back, although a much less successful era. But I don't think of that as much of a 90s jersey.
Oh, no. As I was saying earlier, like when I think of those teams and I think of a line, I think of Garen Smith and Waite. And when I think of a jersey, when I think of Garen Smith and Waite, I think of that jersey. And when I think of that jersey, I think of Garen Smith, Waite. Like those are all kind of intertwined for me.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I love the 80s Oilers jerseys. In fact, it is my favorite jersey. And that I have multiples of the home and away from that era. And I always think that's the Oilers' best look, and that they should eventually go back to those colors. I believe they will as well. But when you talk about that era, I started following hockey closely the year that I started playing minor hockey, which was 1996-97, so when I was 7 years old. And at that time, that was the jersey the Oilers were wearing. And when I remember the 97 playoffs and Todd Marchant scoring that goal, the first year that I'd really followed the Stanley Cup playoffs, I remember watching Wayne Gretzky in the conference final with the Rangers against the Flyers with Eric Lindros. And I remember watching the Oilers knock off the Stars in a huge upset. So that jersey stayed with me my whole childhood. They kept it until I graduated high school in 2007. They wore it for the Oilers Cup run in 06. Like, it's just, when I think of my childhood, that's the Oilers look.
Yeah, and for me too, I remember, I guess I would have been just in junior high when they broke out that jersey, and the 80s Oilers look was so dated, and it was really considered pretty generally uncool at that point in time. Like, just the
that might have tied in with how the team was doing as well, right?
That was part of it, and it was a very 80s look, and in 1995, 96, you could not get more passé than something 1980s.
Exactly. And I had, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so when they updated that, and it was so symbolic of everything, because that was the first year they wore was the year they got back to the playoffs. It was like the team was turning things around again. The city was falling in love with them again. They played good. They looked good. It was just the perfect symmetry.
Absolutely. And my most recent guest before you was Brad McPherson, who's an independent hockey analyst, and he grew up in Edmonton his whole life too. And when I talked to him about being an Oilers fan in the mid to late 90s at that point, like let's say 95, 96, he was in high school, like early high school years, I believe, too, at that time. And he said that it had almost become like uncool to be an Oilers fan. It was like you either cheered for the Detroit Red Wings or the Colorado Avalanche or whoever. Like the Oilers, even though that was the team in your own city, they had almost reached that status where people there didn't, a lot of kids anyway, who didn't remember the Glory Years didn't want to cheer for them. I don't know if you remember.
It's very true. I cheered for them too, but I can vouch for that, is that it was not considered, like, wearing Oilers anything was not a cool look. And
everyone had the starter jackets, but it was like a San Jose Sharks starters jacket or something, right?
Yeah. So it's so when they changed their look and updated their look, and then of course they playoffs there, and really it was just like, and even then back in 94, 95, 96, there were nights they were drawing around 10,000, 11,000 people a game. The team was threatening to move. This was also symbolic of really the rebirth of a franchise, and in many respects, at least in terms of the love affair between team and city, they haven't looked back from that point.
No. Like the Oilers fans have literally stuck through them through worse days than that. Right. The fan support selling out the building consistently through the 2010s, despite only making one playoff appearance. That just speaks to how loyal this fan base is. And I will quickly ask you, so when the Oilers did upset the Stars in 97 and the Avalanche in 98, what was sort of the sense with kids your age when it came to the Oilers? Had the mood really changed where it was cool again to wear Oilers gear?
It was, and I remember being so happy about it too, because I remember being like, because I would get teased all the time about being an Oilers fan, or like if I wore an Oilers hat, it's like, you should be wearing something else, and then all of a sudden here as I'm heading towards high school, it's like, hey, I can cheer for this team and be cool at the same time.
There you go.
And I remember like all these people who wouldn't have been Oilers fans before were all of a sudden loved it. And I'm like, you know what, I could call you out, but I'm just loving the fact that everyone loves this. Yeah. This city has a team again, and everyone loves it. And that to me was just so cool to experience that energy, because for years leading up to it, there was just nothing like it. And like I say, I that is one thing that, for all the trials and tribulations of the team on ice, that is one thing that I don't think has ever left this city since.
That's awesome. I don't know where we can really go from there, but say that such an awesome jersey and such an awesome podcast I was able to do with you today, man. It's just I think that I mentioned this on the live stream with Michael Hebert and Mike Dursa the other day on the Oilers live channel, that asked me what my favorite episode that I'd done is, and I still said the first one with Brian really still stands out. And I think that we accomplished a goal of topping the last one. And up until today, the longest podcast I think I had recorded was something like an hour and 15 minutes, and we are, approaching 2.5 hours now. So this is almost like a Joe Rogan length podcast at this point. So
we're a Marvel movie at this point.
Yeah, we are. We are. I don't know if we'll have as many people listen to it as comes out to a Marvel movie, but if it does, then I would would definitely be in business here. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you so much again for joining me today, and hopefully you had an enjoyable time kind of counting down these jerseys and all-time dream teams as well.
Oh, I always have a blast talking with you. It's so much fun reminiscing and talking about these things we should have a shared passion for. And
yeah,
I hope you have me back sometime, and I hope it's for episode number.
Oh 99. Yes. No, you'll be back soon. It's like I said, I wanted to have 10 different guests before I had brought in another person, but you were my first guest, and I thought you were the only person I wanted to be my first repeat guest as well. So I'm glad you came back, and yeah, it's like I said, hopefully we'll have more current hockey to talk about the next time. But yeah, it's kind of fun to do these sort of all-time lists when there really isn't any live sports on TV.
For sure, and I think even just through the process of this, we've already come up with like 8 other all-time lists we think we should do too. So hopefully hockey and hopefully all sports is back. But if it's not, I think we're well prepared.
There you go. And I lost my train of thought. I had another question I wanted to ask you that I'll probably kick myself for not remembering later. But yeah, if we are able to do this again soon, that'd be great. For you. I know you talked about your own podcast that you were doing. Is the plan to bring it back next winter as well, or have those discussions not been had yet?
Yeah, I haven't gone down that road yet. Everything, university sports is just like everything else. It's so much up in the air, and there's even additional considerations for it too. Once you factor in the thing that it's an extracurricular activity for students, which really adds a whole other dimension to it as opposed to just professionals doing it for a living. So really, in Canada West, we're really not sure, like anybody else, what the future looks like for sport. Hope to get back to it as soon as possible, but of course only when it's safe and healthy for everyone to do so. So until that day comes, extracurricular program that we have around it is very much on hold. So you know what, we'll just we're all in this together, of course, and we'll just keep doing what we do. And I know things like this, being able to talk to things like this, help us get through the days. And I hope everyone who's listening to it too just gets a little bit something out of it as well.
Perfect. And I did remember what I was thinking, so I'm glad I was able to still fit this in. We almost had a chance to meet about 6 weeks ago, but as luck would have it, when I was in Edmonton to play in the Oilers Live Cup, and then go to the NHL game that night, which was awesome because I got to see the Oilers beat the Jets and on Hockey Night in Canada. And also for the first time ever, I'm above 500 as a fan in attendance for the Oilers. I was I think another awesome thing about that weekend is we raised a lot of money for the Heart and Stroke Foundation with the Oilers Live Cup. So that's probably the biggest takeaway. But it's funny, the weekend I was in Edmonton hoping to run into you. Where were you?
I was in the mighty city of Saskatoon.
Yeah, you were here, and you were covering the Golden Bears, right?
I was there with Canada West for the hockey championship. Actually, the Golden Bears weren't in it. It was they got upset.
That's right. By
UBC, but it was UBC Saskatchewan rolled to victory there. But yeah, it was so funny because. And I mean, we could do a podcast in itself on all the near misses we've had.
Oh, I just can't believe it.
The odds. You could probably tell the stories about the previous time you were here and how your car got stuck. That was when we had that incredibly brutal cold snap in Edmonton.
Oh,
a historic cold snap, really. And
it was.
It's just. And then I know you were saying, and then we said to each other, okay, well, you know what? We'll see each other when you come here for the playoffs.
Yeah, and then now even if there,
so far.
yeah, and even if there is playoffs, so I won't be coming out, which is also a kick in the pants because I was really hoping that I'd get to come see the Oilers play a live playoff game, something I'd really been looking forward to doing for the first time ever. But yeah, I came for my birthday in January, was planning to stay it was going to be 3 nights because there was the day that I drove there and then spent one whole day in Edmonton, and then I was supposed to drive home the following day. So I guess it would have been it was supposed to be 2 nights and 3 days, I guess you could say. So and then car won't start. Had a guy come out, try and jump me, had a friend come out, couldn't get it going, and had to stay an additional 2 nights there. So after 5 days at the Coliseum Inn, my parents
Coliseum Inn.
Shout out to them, and I'll give them credit. They gave me the employee discount for my second for my third and fourth night. So the first 2 nights I paid regular price, but after that they were very generous to do that for me, which was just over half the price. So thank you to them. My parents eventually were able to make their way out to Edmonton, bring me home, and then after that, my dad and I, the following week, about 4 days later, came back to Edmonton. It was a long day. We left the house at like 6 a.m., got to Edmonton. He got my car going in about 20 minutes, and then we drove straight back home. So a long day of driving, but yeah, it's one of those things. You never know in Edmonton, but I guess when you're coming in January, you have to kind of assume that the weather's going to be pretty rough, and luckily no damage to the car or anything.
And at least the Oilers won that game. Right?
They won that, and that was against the Predators.
If they hadn't,
if
you would have gone through all that just to see a loss. So I'm glad they won. I know they're on a bit of a streak for you lately because you saw a couple losses there in a row, but I think they've turned things around with you in attendance.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think here. So they won in Calgary last April when I was there. Then they beat Winnipeg in September when I was there, so that's 2 in a row. Then they lost to Florida in October, but after that they beat Nashville and Winnipeg with me there. So 4 out of my last 5 has really helped turn around the record.
If 4 out of 5, you'll take that. What is?
Oh
that?
yeah, the fact that
the math here, is that like a 120-point season?
I think so. Like the fact that I made it through the decade of darkness, being relatively close to 500, I definitely caught some lucky games.
The record without you is much worse than it is with you.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, I had a tendency to go to like when I was younger, I only went to 1 game a year, and it would always be late in the season. And by then, a lot of times the other team had checked out or they're getting ready for the playoffs, and the Oilers, playing spoiler, had nothing really to play for, would come in and they'd beat the Wild or they'd beat the Canucks, and I'd get to see a win at least. So it's like, well, they're not going to the playoffs again this year, but at least I got to see something good. So anyway,
your stats.
I padded my stats, but I think I've probably kept you longer than I even planned tonight. So thank you for sticking with me for almost the full 2.5 hours tonight, man.
Oh, it was a great time, and as I mentioned, anytime I always enjoy getting on and doing these with you.
Definitely, and I'll tag you in all this on Twitter. But for anyone who's going to the Oilers Live page and they need to know where to follow you, where can they find you?
You can follow me at Brian Swane, Swane. It's just my name, nothing too creative, but that's where you'll get me.
And he is a great follow, by the way. And one of the things that I really appreciate that you do is that you are a huge promoter of Canadian players in the NBA. And you always seem to find these really cool stats of a Canadian NBA player who did this or did that, or the most Canadian players in one night ever. And it's just, I really love how you're able to find that information and kind of promote the players from our game. And I'm sure that in your lifetime, it's going to be really exciting because as this game continues to grow, and the Vince Carter and Steve Nash effect are still there, but when you add in what the Raptors winning the championship last year is going to do for basketball in this country in the next 20 years, I'm sure you're going to be thrilled to see how the game has really grown with Canadian players.
Sure, and it leaps and bounds year to year, and this was just another exciting season. And unfortunately, I'm not thinking we're going to see the end of it, but you never know. Hey, I guess if you're optimistic for the NHL coming back, I'll be optimistic for the NBA coming back.
I'm trying to hold on hope. Like I really feel like the NHL is they're at least planning to try. I feel like they wouldn't have postponed some of their events in June if they felt that it was going to not happen. So maybe they're more optimistic than me. The only thing that could get tricky is, will Canada and the USA be on the same page with medical things? Because there will be, travel between the two countries, and does all the regulations meet what both countries have lined up? So we'll have to see how
one of the many things. That is one of the big things that I think maybe kind of has.
And I'm not into politics at all, so I wouldn't want to really go into any deep conversation about any political leaders and what they might be thinking. So I'll leave that aside.
Fair enough. Yeah. We'll see. Like, there's a lot of bridges that need to be crossed here. That's for sure.
Absolutely. But anyway, thank you again so much, Brian, and hope we'll do this again soon.
All right. Thank you again.
So for Brian Swane, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.